In one part of the world, there is a huge blue magical portal to another world called the Demon Realm. Over there was an assembly that looked like some sort of temporary base for soldiers. You can see people gathering and wearing attributes to fight. These soldiers are called raid units, which are special combinations. Then a guide is seen asking the team to check the team's supplies and their positions, as well as ammunition and logistics as well. Meanwhile, on the other hand, several youths seemed enthusiastic about this mission, because behind them was the red-line tiger who had never lost. Meanwhile, on the other hand, there was a young man who looked very calm. He was cleaning his shiny sword with a cloth. Unintentionally, he heard the conversation of the youths who were not far from him. This man named Seo Gangrim M. He is a member of the Flying Tiger sect. The youths asked each other about their class level. In his heart, he thought that the Flying Tiger sect didn't only sort its members based on class. With a gloomy face, he knew that the sect didn't just sort by class, because if that was the case, there was no way he would be in this place. 5 years ago, after the day of awakening, everyone's abilities were determined according to their basis destiny was something one was born with. And while thinking of this, Gangrim thought that fate was just empty. Gangrim's reverie was shattered when someone poked him, a young man who invites Gangrim to chat. He asked kindly, but the Gangrim was surprised that someone dared to talk to him. So Gangrim just kept quiet, and didn't respond because he assumed that person was just a rookie who didn't know who he was. Not long after, the young man was called again by another group not far from Gangrim M. Then the young man was told that the figure he had just spoken to was Seo Gangrim EM. Suddenly, the young man's face turned pale when he heard the name Seo Gangrim M. He regretted having greeted her and made eye contact with her. Hearing this, the Gangrim couldn't help but remain silent as the young man finally walked away with the rest of the crowd. He was not surprised to see the response of people who shunned him, as rumors spread that the Gangrim had killed his comrades and taken their powers. Many people came back full of wounds when they teamed up with Gangrim EM, to the point where it was said that the destiny of death was written around Seo Gangrim M. So if someone is on the same team as him, he will be unlucky. Rumors like that keep spreading. This is because of the power of Gangrim M. This young man has a special power that can check a person's destiny. In addition, he also has the power to extract a portion of the fate of a dead opponent and make it his destiny. Fate that, according to Gangrim, is unpleasant and true, if many Gangrim teammates end up returning from missions injured. Even the Gangrim thought that maybe his comrades were affected by his bad luck. Destiny class is divided into 5, and the highest one is Divine Destiny. After that is Dragonic Ghostly, Humanistic, and Insert Tale. These classes are again divided into Elementary Class, Middle Class, and High Class. While Gangrim grade was the lowest of the low, the bottom of the bottom in other words, this young man wasn't strong enough to kill another Awakener. After all, some special conditions must be met to use its power. Gangrim lowered his head sadly. Because he didn't do anything heinous like stealing destiny or corpses. Gangrim got annoyed with himself. While he was closing his eyes and scolding himself, suddenly a girl sat in front of him and asked, "What is he doing now?" Gangrim was a little surprised by the attitude of this girl named Yu Harang, but he soon controlled himself well. Harang wanted to invite the Gangrim to a dinner party after the extermination mission. Then by her side was another young man named Jang Tae-hoon, who was also excited to invite her to the party. Because previously the Gangrim had not attended such a party either. Gangrim stood up and said he wouldn't come to a place like that. In his heart, Gangrim knew that he would only be humiliated like trash by others if he attended such a party. Harang immediately stood up with her hands on her hips in annoyance, because she was willing to leave her school field trip for the dinner party. Harang said loudly that he would beat up anyone who dared to harass Gangrim M, while the young man who was 10 years older than him turned his head in annoyance at the little girl's tone. But Harang refuses to back down because, after all, he is stronger than Gangrim M. Harang and Tae-hoon excitedly grabbed Gangrim's arms and kept pushing him to come to the dinner party. When the two of them had gone too far, a deep voice came from a man who asked them to get ready to return to their positions, because the mission this time was about to begin. The figure of the man named Kang Do-hyun. He managed to get the two boys to let go of the Gangrim and waltz away. After Gangrim waved to Harang and Tae-hoon, Do-hyun's figure approached and asked him to take good care of himself with full vigilance. Gangrim says that it is the group at the front that is in danger. While he's behind, we'll be a little safe. Do-hyun kindly said that he was still worried because Gangrim wasn't around. Gangrim smiled and sincerely thanked Do-hyun for his concern. As Do-hyun turned and walked away, Gangrim N grumbled inside his heart. Because he wanted to fight by the young man's side. But you can't because the ones standing in the front row are those with high ranks. Not long after, the voice from the speaker sounded again, asking all of them to carry out the tasks that had been assigned to their groups. Because right now, everyone is standing inside the gate of the devil's dimension, which is wide open. He closed his eyes. At this moment, he kept convincing himself that he would only take care of the demon remnants, so he had to do his best so as not to harm the people of others. Suddenly, huge crimson monsters started to appear. Then someone shouted that high-class monsters appeared en masse. So the large group had to rush in to fight them, while the group at the back had to stand guard in front of the demon gate's entrance. Then there was a fierce battle between the awakeners on the front line and the motorbikes that were quite terrible. From both sides it seemed that no one wanted to give in. Even the Do-hyun and Seo brothers seemed to be very persistent against the monsters. Until then they heard instructions that monster Shokwis were being summoned. So the fighters in the back line are asked to be ready to fight. The surrounding conditions became more tense when the big red monster attacked, especially when a group of goblins appeared with red eyes staring at them ferociously. The people in the rear began to fight with the goblins. Initially their position was quite safe, but more and more goblins came. They became overwhelmed until finally Gangrim was hit by goblin attacks and fell to the ground. The Gangrim was having a really hard time breathing, and his body was weak because he went too deep into the devil's area. This young man wanted to get out of that place, but suddenly a goblin attacked him from behind, making the young man fall and was immediately surrounded by a herd of goblins who looked very happy. In such a desperate situation, Gangrim could only hope in his heart that someone would come to help him. Then a dazzling green eyelight appeared and swept away all the goblins from around the Gangrim. Along with the sound of that green light, appeared a tough woman with a patch over one eye. It was the Madam of the Flying Tiger sect. He had come just in time to save the low-class awakeners. Everyone cheers thanking the lady. So did he wave his hand while saying thank you? Whispering, the woman named Shin Sua responded to Gangrim's waving hand with a friendly smile. Suddenly the large rock around them vibrated, and there was a roar that sent chills down the spine. Everyone immediately looked in panic in one direction, because they suspected that the boss monsters of these monsters had appeared. They were surprised that the boss monster had appeared, considering they still had a long way to go to the boss area. Finally, a monster that was bigger than a mountain appeared in front of everyone. Someone immediately instructed the fire-type hunters to stand in front and block the boss monster. But before the big monster put up a fight, suddenly someone came and slashed it into pieces. Everyone covered their faces as dust scattered when the monster was brought down, blood pouring everywhere. Then when the dust cleared, a long-haired girl appeared and immediately asked, "Where is Seo Gangrim?" Everyone standing at the forefront was speechless at the girl's strength, while those standing behind were curious to see who had appeared and what had happened. Gangrim himself was astonished at the girl's strength to be able to kill a boss monster alone. Gangrim wonders why the strong girl is looking for him. Because no one answered, the girl raised a sword and slashed everyone with her powerful strength. Gangrim was even more astonished to see that incident, especially when she heard the girl say that she would kill everyone, just because of the assumption that Gangrim was among them. Her hideous cold face would make anyone shudder with fear. Of course, everyone was surprised to see the girl's ability when killing boss monsters. But they wonder, why is the girl looking for Gangrim, while the Gangrim themselves were watching from quite a distance above? When using the power of destiny detection, he can see the girl named Baekhyong. He had an extremely powerful divine grade primary grade. Gangrim himself was astonished to see that there was such a class. His visions told him that a person who obtained the primary divine grade could return to the past with the memories he had still intact. Gangrim was amazed to see the Regency's strength. He wanted to get closer and find out if there was any information about him from that girl. But suddenly the tree branch before him glowed green and telepathically told him to stay where he was. The telepathy was sent by Shin, the head of the sect. Of course, Gangrim did not dare to argue, because he felt it was not his realm to interfere. Shin asked the girl, "What does she want?" But the girl named just asked, "Is he Gangrim?" Soa firmly replied that the young man was a member of his sect, so he could ask himself about Gangrim. Dissatisfied with the answer to the question, Baekhyun immediately slashed several members of the tiger flying team in front of him. With a cold face covered in blood, he said that he would kill everyone assuming a Gangrim was among them. Seo attacked full of rage at Baekhyun. He will not forgive a foreign woman who hurts his members. When the atmosphere started to get chaotic, the Gangrim was still trying to cut the large branches made by the Seo to block it. At that time, Seo had been thrown away with a body full of wounds. In front of everyone, Baekhyun continues to slaughter the members visible in his eyes. When Seo felt increasingly tormented by Baekhyun's behavior, the girl with white hair became even more violent, attacking the innocent people there. In a matter of seconds, the sharp edge of Seo's sword was at Do Hyun's neck and cut him without hesitation. Screams of pain were heard everywhere. He also tried to fight with his bare hands, and in the end he died at the hands of Baekhyun. With one strike, the people outside the barrier that Baekhyun had made panicked. They continued to chase the barrier wall, asking the girl to open it and stop her madness. But he paid no heed to it, and continued to attack the survivors within the barrier. Screams full of pain increasingly blaring in all directions. The atmosphere is getting tense compared to fighting the monsters. Gangrim himself was still trying to cut such a large tree branch with his sword and his strength, until finally, he managed to cut the last branch, causing him to fall right in front of Baekhyun. Gangrim fell in a pool of blood of his comrades. Gangrim immediately turned pale, seeing so many corpses scattered around him. Even all the tough people he knew were lifeless. Gangrim was so sad that he was moved to tears, realizing that he was too late. This young man was so struck that he kept blaming himself. He wished it wasn't too late to come to prevent everyone's death. Gangrim was still crying until he didn't realize that Baekhyun was already standing in front of him, raising his sword. "Get ready to cut it!" But suddenly large branches appeared under the Baekhyun to block the Gangrim. It was an attack from Seo, who was still able to get back up to attack his opponent. Then there was a sword fight between them, until finally, Baekhyun's sword stabbed right into Seo's chest. With a cold and ruthless face, he said that if one would surrender the Gangrim, then the rest of the sect would be spared. Even though he was stabbed by Baekhyun's sword in critical condition, Seo can still say that a sect leader must protect members of his sect. With a last scream, the barrier finally disappeared. In the last second of his life, Seo Masi had time to ask the Gangrim to run away immediately. Seo dead. Baekhyun drew his sword and immediately turned to Gangrim, who was trembling with fear. Gangrim is scared and thinks that he can't possibly win against Baekhyun. He was sure he would soon be killed by the girl because that was Baekhyun's goal from the start. This young man thought that he was the only person who should die. This young man regretted that many people became victims because he was included in Seo. Finally, the Gangrim system appears and gives the option to use the power of stealing destiny. With the current state of being struck, the Gangrim could no longer think about morals. He decided to use this power, and when the system asked which of the 421 bodies around him, Gangrim would choose to steal whose fate. So this young man confidently chose to use the destiny of all the bodies that were there. The system started checking the stolen destiny gradually, but due to the low magic rank, just under one condition, the skill would be automatically activated. Gangrim continues to blame himself. While his skill was actively detecting people's souls, the Gangrim's abilities gradually increased when he succeeded in copying the souls of his comrades. But on the other hand, he remembered what people said, that he was jinxed, bringing the fate of death to those around him. Gangrim remembered the faces of those closest to him who had to die because of him. At that time, Baekhyun had arrived right in front of Gangrim and said that he had a unique destiny. Right when the woman wanted to kill the Gangrim, the young man immediately brushed aside his sword with the agility skill he had acquired. Now Gangrim has succeeded in copying the souls of 421 of his comrades' bodies. Gangrim looks very excited against Baekhyun. He doesn't hesitate at all, even though his opponent is a girl. Gangrim's burning eyes reflected the determination in his heart that said he couldn't let this all end so badly. Gangrim is determined to kill Baekhyun before he dies, along with their fierce battle. Skills and keen vision skills were activated automatically. Even his reflexes had greatly improved after absorbing people's souls. So Gangrim can now fight very strongly. Gangrim's abilities continue to increase and increase in battle. He even gains pain resistance abilities that can minimize his pain. Gangrim continued to fight until Baekhyun was pushed and Gangrim found an opening from behind. When the Gangrim wanted to stab the woman from behind, suddenly the woman issued a very large and sharp crystal skill attack. Then Gangrim fell to the ground as he was hit by that attack. until he coughed up blood that was quite bad. Inside his heart, Gangrim was cursing again at himself who still couldn't get revenge properly. Despite having the abilities he stole from people, the Gangrim let their guard down. Some skills activated automatically, but this young man couldn't make good use of those skills due to his poor body and weapons. When Gangrim slumped, Baekhyun stood towering while raising his sword, preparing to attack with his next skill. The girl with a cold face gave a crystal rain attack to the Gangrim which successfully overwhelmed the young man in front of her. Gangrim panicked because he couldn't use the great abilities he had stolen from people. But then, he remembered there was one ability that he understood very well. So with all his might, Gangrim pulled out a crystal embedded in his leg. Then Baekhyun was near Gangrim to kill him. Again, the girl had to be beaten back by Gangrim's abilities using Soa's wild plant control skills. Gangrim deliberately used Soa's ability because he was very familiar with the technique of this skill. The ability called Tree Lift allows the user to create large, sharp tree trunks to be used as weapons. Baekhyun is amazed by Gangrim's abilities. Initially, Baekhyun thought Gangrim's ability was short-manship. He was not good at using spells. But according to Baekhyun, a spell like this won't last long. While thinking like that, Baekhyun was busy continuing to slash the large stalks that were attacking him. While his attention was being distracted by the attacks of the tree trunks, the Gangrim infiltrated from behind, lifted Baekhyun's crystal, and immediately stabbed the woman's body with his weapon. But before he could digest everything, Baekhyun had to die with a slash wound in his neck. Then the Gangrim quickly pulled out the crystal to make the bleeding worse. After that, they both fell together. But this time Gangrim smiled happily, because he had succeeded in killing Baekhyun and avenging him. When the Gangrim fell on the ground, his injuries grew even worse. Even so, the smile did not leave his face. He was really happy to have managed to kill Baekhyun. The moment the regeneration system for his injuries started, Gangrim immediately ordered the system to stop. He thought there was no point in him getting better if nothing changed. For Gangrim then and now, nothing will change. Gangrim remembers when a female fortune-teller used to say that destiny was full of fear and death. The old lady also added that Gangrim would lose his parents at a young age, and his life would be full of misfortune. Exactly as the fortune-teller said, Gangrim's parents did die not long after, and because he often had various accidents, the people around him also had bad luck. This young man often had incidents of robberies and accidents, as if he was destined to continue to be weak and unlucky. Even so, there are people who still accept it despite knowing this bad fate. He is the head of the sect, Showa, Do-yoon, and also the Seo brothers. Even so, they still die to keep the Gangrim. Gangrim is really down. He regretted not being able to meet Baekhyun first. He hoped to be the first to die so that there would not be too many victims. Gangrim wished he could turn back time and fix everything. It was at this moment that Gangrim remembered Baekhyun's divine grade primary skill. Without wasting any time, Gangrim immediately stared at Baekhyun's body and stole his fate. With this, Gangrim hoped to return to the past to meet Baekhyun and get rid of him first. So with all his heart, Gangrim hopes and begs for his newfound ability to return to the past. Then Gangrim opened his eyes and realized he was now sitting on the sofa in the living room of his house. Gangrim was clearly in shock at how quickly he moved. Then when this young man heard a knock on the door, Gangrim's eyes immediately lit up with a wide smile, realizing that he had managed to return to the past, to the time when Soa was still alive and well. Currently in front of the Gangrim sat two people of different sexes. The man looks really excited to get a prediction from the Gangrim about how compatible they both are as a couple. While on the side of the seat, Soa looks silent and uncomfortable. Gangrim looked very happy to be reunited with Shin Soa and saw this woman not wearing a blindfold. This time the Gangrim was determined not to let Shin Soa get hurt and die. Gangrim asked the two people in front of him to write down the name, date of birth, and the time they met on a piece of paper. At this point, the Gangrim noticed that Soa looked uncomfortable. Gangrim remembered how he used to tell me that he was involved with a strange man. After the Gangrim got their data, he started calculating the compatibility of the two of them. Gangrim recites that the man's horoscope is solid gold type, while the woman's is solid wood, as it is called gold cut wood, which means it is very poor compatibility, where the axe will cut down the tree. The Gangrim recited their prophecy with a cheerful smile, which was a stark contrast to his results. The man was clearly surprised to hear the results of the Gangrim prediction. Even so, Soa instead smiling happily. Meanwhile, the man by his side was angry and felt that he was being toyed with by the Gangrim. The young man wanted to go straight with Soa, but the girl at his side refused to go with him, because she wanted to hear his fortune-telling. The man's face got even worse because she refused to go with him. She reminded her that she would not get another man. Gangrim, who heard that, was a little annoyed and immediately shooed away the man in front of him smoothly. Finally, the man left the room, slamming the door loudly, leaving the Gangrim alone with a Soa. As soon as the strange man left, Soa immediately told Gangrim that he thought places like this only gave answers that were fun to hear. Gangrim also smiled awkwardly, because he admitted in his heart that he used to do that for the sake of getting money. Because according to the young man in front of him, this young man was quite skilled at fortune-telling, so he wanted to ask for a fortune-telling. The Gangrim will gladly do so. But just as Gangrim finishes speaking, a strange siren sounds. Sirens that eat ears and make buildings shake violently. Both of them immediately panicked, but the Gangrim couldn't do much. Facing the tremors and strong dizziness that appeared, he could only hold his head with his face grimacing in pain. Soa also shouted to ask the Gangrim to get under the table. But because the young man didn't respond, Soa finally pulled the arm of the Gangrim just like that to get under the table. The two of them continued to hide under the table until the situation was safe again, and the strong vibrations they felt had disappeared. Soa wonders what strange announcement just sounded. When Soa is digesting everything, Gangrim got up first and entered the kitchen. The young man was looking for an object that was suitable for self-defense. After he found it, the Gangrim immediately stored it quickly into his coat. Soa suddenly appeared and pulled her out of the room. They ran down the hall. When suddenly there was a scream from the direction of their right aisle. People came running while chanting, "Soa monster!" Apparently behind them appears a large worm monster that eats human bodies. Soa wanted to help, but he didn't have a weapon. So the Gangrim stepped forward and stabbed the worm with the knife he got from the kitchen, and he knew they were coming. That's why he was looking for a weapon. The worm is called the gigantic worm. Although they usually eat grass, these worms also want to eat humans and animals. The Gangrim swiftly slashed at the worms while warning the people to go to a safe place. The Gangrim kept slashing at the worms until there wasn't even one left. But suddenly there was a scream from the other direction. The Gangrim swiftly ran to the source of the sound while shouting a warning to the people to do something so they wouldn't die. After all, these insect monsters weren't really that strong. When Gangrim arrived, he saw that the monster had been defeated by Soa using a fire extinguisher. The girl told the others that the monsters weren't strong, proof that he can kill one. Gangrim smiled a little, seeing Soa's behavior, which made the girl confused. Gangrim smiles, seeing the figure that usually kills dragons looks so happy to be able to kill small worms that are not that strong. This is really a funny irony for Gangrim. Then Gangrim directed people to pass through the stairs he had cleared of monsters. He ordered everyone to get down quickly before more monsters appeared. While everyone was busy running out, the Gangrim booked the agency to take the spirit pearl from the carcass of the worm monster. Even though it was lower grade and small in size, those pearls were much better than Gangrim expected. When the Gangrim was busy cleaning the pearls from the mucus, Soa's voice was heard asking why the young man didn't come down. Gangrim answered the question of the girl in front of him by asking back, "Why didn't he immediately evacuate?" Gangrim asks, "Is Soa really worried about someone he just met today, namely himself?" With a look away, Soa confirms Gangrim's words. This young man also knows that Soa is still the same as before. His high sympathy makes Gangrim sure to tell Soa everything. He then informs that Shinsoa got the Terry Dragon class. Still shocked. But Gangrim continues to say what is written on Soa's status hologram screen, that he has an ability called the tree method. He was even more surprised when finally his window of destiny opened, and what the young man in front of him said was exactly what was seen in the window of destiny. Gangrim said that the announcement they heard the other day during the attack by worm monsters, that these guys seemed to get superpowers. While Soa was still busy reading all the information on the hologram screen of his destiny window, Gangrim immediately opened his cell phone, thinking that the two of them shouldn't have died if they didn't meet that one. Then the two of them went down through the emergency stairs using the lighting from the cell phone. While walking down the stairs, Soa asks what destiny is written in the Gangrim's window of destiny. The young man in front of him replied, not to tell each other about the contents of the window of their destiny, because he suspected that others could read it. In his heart, Gangrim knows that his fate is the same as 5 years ago. The Gangrim realized he had not kept any abilities he had stolen before he regressed, because when he saw the window of his destiny, he saw that his abilities were still the same, namely tracing destiny and stealing other people's destiny. Only one thing was different from the present window of fate. That was, he had accumulated enormous karma from the past. Gangrim understands that this is because he has stolen the destiny of 421 people. But if he wanted to change the past, he needed to use the ability to steal destiny, even though it was dangerous to accumulate a lot of karma. Karma builds up when someone commits a big crime, such as killing or stealing someone's destiny. If karma accumulates too much, the target will go beyond normal limits. Gangrim continues to walk with that terrible shadow, so he had to be more careful from now on, because he knew that those who crossed the line would end up suffering suddenly. Soa called out to the Gangrim when he saw someone's shadow in the passage of the floor he was examining. The person was like being wrapped in threads all over his body. Quickly, Soa ran to him and said he would free him. Suddenly, a large animal appeared from behind the mysterious man's body, which was entangled in threads. The Gangrim nimbly stepped forward and slashed at the huge worm. Once the monsters had vanished, Garim immediately used his destiny-stealing ability to check whether the person inside the steamer was dead or alive, because if he's alive, there's no way the Gangrim can steal his abilities. It finally turns out that he really can absorb the abilities of people inside the cocoon. By this, he knew that the man was dead. Even though that person has very good abilities, Gangrim is saddened by the death of the stranger, because he has the ability to manipulate fire. That ability finally belonged to the Gangrim. This young man was quite happy with this new ability. Boom! Again, Soa immediately ran when he heard something. The Gangrim had to follow him to keep him safe. In one corner of the passage, there was a young man who was vigorously and happily slaying the worm monsters. When the young man's blue eyes caught the silhouette of 2 people, he stopped and greeted them. He didn't think there were still survivors on that floor. Gangrim slightly alert. When the figure of the strange man approached them, seeing that the other person was a little afraid, the young man introduced himself as a Gojun. Hearing that name, Gangrim immediately smiled and welcomed the man's outstretched hand. After hearing the name of Rim's gang, he asked the name of the girl in front of him. With a wide-open, friendly smile, this young man dives into the hands of the 2 of them, while talking about the allied events that have ended. Soa, who is usually smart, was confused by this man's words. Gojun also said, "Fairy game introduction," which made the 2 people in front of him even more confused, even though this man has the attributes of the goal category and the ability as a leader. Gangrim remembered this young man would become the leader of one of the 5 great sects. But still, Gangrim is horrified to see the results of the Gojun massacre, which even now has not awakened. Gojun says to defeat opponent, need allies, or get powerful allies. Amidst the fight, the Gangrim finds out this young man is a famous web novel author. But it's still very strange to hear him talk like he's having a discussion like now. Then there was another scream from someone at the other end of the hall. Apparently at this time the big worm who was the boss of the little worm monster they met earlier finally appeared before the 3 of them. The big worm managed to knock over a grown man, then ate him. Soa was a little stunned to see this terrible sight with Soa. It was different with Gojun, who became very excited and wanted to finish him off. Soa immediately prevented the young man. Without them realizing it, Gangrim had lit a fire in his hand and immediately shot the fireball at the big worm. Instantly, the monster roared in pain. Gojun was amazed to see Gangrim's abilities. He also asked if they could beat the big worm. The Gangrim slowly replied that they couldn't beat him for the time being, as he could only deal minor damage. So for now, he told them to run fast, while himself ran while throwing small fireballs to hinder the big worm monster. The monster continued roaring furiously as it chased its 3 prey. Gangrim tried to run as hard as he could, when the huge worm's body crashed into the wall and created quite a shocking explosion. Soa screamed in panic, worried about the Gangrim that was still lagging behind him. Realizing the worm was getting closer, Gojun grabbed Soa's arm to quickly run away with him, leaving the Gangrim. Meanwhile, Gangrim alone is forced to face the big worm alone. The giant worm monster turned its head towards Soa, and the Gojuns took off quickly. The Gangrim threw fireballs at the monster to keep him from looking away from the other 2 people. The Gangrim tried to get the creature's attention from chasing the other 2 people. The monster immediately attacked the Gangrim, who managed to dodge with agility. This young man kept trying to avoid, For the sake of buying time until the rescue team came, Gangrim kept running until he fell rolled on the floor. This young man was a little irritated that he could only do so little damage to an SI monster's body, until finally the big worm monster opened its mouth and gave the Gangrim an idea to throw fireballs right into the monster's mouth. Blare! Suddenly a fireball burned the flesh in the monster's mouth, making the beast immediately lower its head and sprawl on the floor. He looked like he was in a lot of pain and his body was shaking. But suddenly the monster raised its eyes again and glared at the Gangrim. When this young man felt very pressed, suddenly the big worm monster was pelted with wooden balls by someone. Apparently the one who came to help the Gangrim was Seo. This girl was carrying a pile of wood while telling the Gangrim to run. Unfortunately, the worm monster actually split itself into small worms that invaded the Seo. Luckily, the Gangrim immediately helped him by burning the worms while fighting. Gangrim told Seo to use his special skill, but Seo refused because there were no trees around them. Gangrim ordered to try on wood. Sure enough, when Seo asked the wood he was holding to grow, then they actually grew into quite large tree branches. At first the girl was surprised to see her non-magical ability, but she immediately asked the tree branch to grow bigger in order to fend off the worm monster. Unexpectedly, the branch of the tree actually directly attacked the big worm monster. Gangrim and Seo were stunned by his quite extraordinary abilities. When Seo was aware of the shock, he immediately pulled Gangrim's arm to run away. But again they had to face difficulties because the big worm monster broke itself into more small worm monsters. Seo immediately fell to his knees. He felt their history was over by now. While being stricken with great fear, Gangrim says wood starts a fire. Then a system notification appeared and said that the destiny of the two humans had been intertwined, with destiny Seo giving life to Seo Gangrim. That's why the flames that the Gangrim released instantly burned the wood to a blaze, which meant it burned the worm monsters that were above it. While continuing to fuel the flames, the Gangrim think that their abilities are based on their common destiny and the logic of the Bazi horoscope set in battle. No. How long does it take for the system notification to appear notifying that they have successfully removed the big worm? Primary insectile grade. With this, they are entitled to a record of achievement. Seo couldn't believe they had succeeded in killing the boss. Meanwhile, Gangrim sat down with a limp body. Seo panicked seeing her like this, but the Gangrim managed to convince the girl that she was fine. After that, they arrived at the first floor, which looked safer. Seo has to help support Gangrim's body, which is weakened by the loss of mana. Seo had felt safe because they had arrived in a deserted place, but when this girl opened the door, the wind blew from inside the room that seemed foreign to them, especially when they entered this room. Their physical condition began to improve. Plus, there is a totem pole that looks weird in the middle of the lobby. When the two lovebirds were reading information about the pole, suddenly the door behind them suddenly disappeared. Seo immediately panicked, but Gangrim reminded him to rest first. Anyway, in that room, nothing. How come you guys are still alive? Suddenly there was a man who said like this from the middle of the room. I immediately got emotional seeing this figure, but the man who is none other than the Gojin is thinking about Seo instead. Gangrim is a hero or not? Hearing this, he became angry and immediately accused him of being a side villain who betrayed his friends. Gojin was dumbfounded. Hearing that, he couldn't accept being seen as an evil and side character, nor did he want to heed this strange man. He also invites Seo to rest somewhere. Not how long, the people who are still alive around that place also gathered in this room. Most of them were surprised to feel conditions suddenly change and they were transported. Even they were shocked when they felt the wounds on their bodies disappear in an instant. While people were busy asking and grumbling looking around, suddenly someone in front of the altar stood up and caught everyone's attention. This figure introduced himself as Anafikasha from the Flat Protection Agency's Central Branch Office. He said he would be in charge of taking care of everyone in the room, but his mysterious figure and wearing a mask made people distrust him. They shouted at the mysterious figure with angry faces, some even accused him of being a thief. Meanwhile, in a back corner, the Gangrim think that this is the real start. In a past life, this young man might have been a loser, but now he was determined to make a difference. With his palms folded in front of his chest, the Gangrim resolved to grow even stronger. Before he left to deal with the angry and suspicious attitude of the people towards him, the figure in front of the altar explained patiently that their duty was to protect the citizens from the coming calamity. Most of them asked what was the meaning of all this, every time the mysterious figure was about to answer a protest. People even interrupted their voices, He continued to get blasphemy, cynical words, and even threats. Because he couldn't stand people's words, the Gojun screamed for them to be quiet. The people who had been noisy and protesting immediately fell silent and stared at the Gojon. The young man angrily reminded them to be grateful for this special opportunity. Gangrim was a little annoyed to see Gojun's attitude, but what he did this time was right. To be elected to that spot was a privilege. Seeing this commotion, the masked figure finally chose to show up head-on. What actually happened through the live video? A large holographic screen appeared behind him, showing a video of the monsters attacking the Seoul area. The masked figure said that all over the otherworldly countries the so-called demon world had appeared and monsters were coming from there. The Fade Protection Agency had already predicted this, so the Asian group had awakened the ability in front of everyone to prepare for today's calamity. They could fight monsters with powers beyond normal humans. However, in the now chaotic world they needed more awakened. That's why they summoned all the survivors in the room. Because they believe survivors have more potential than non-awakened ones. This organization is willing to help people become stronger under the leadership of the Protection Agency. But they are also allowed to leave at any time. After seeing his abilities, because they might change their minds, the mysterious figure took an amulet and burned it, making a record of fate. Everyone appeared in front of them all. The people sitting in the room were shocked to see their fate records. But that's not the case with Gangrim, because he already knows all his destiny and power. What bothers Gangrim now is the fact that he can't read the takbir of anyone in front of him. This was because he wore the mask of that mysterious figure. He said that anyone who had seen his ability could attribute it to their own supernatural powers or magic. Those out there who are awakened use abilities to hunt monsters or invade the demon world to eliminate threats. But it is a dangerous job. From within the process, everyone could die the same with practice. But if everyone in the room wanted to escape from danger and wanted to be protected, they would have to remove the ability. Because people who do not have the will to fight are not entitled to receive abilities. They are given 1 hour to think. The mysterious figure clapped his hands once more, and suddenly the room turned into a large, bright hall. Everyone was asked to rest on the second floor. They were then given manuals as well. There they were asked to read the manual. Then those who have decided to join are asked to return to the hall. As for those who want to leave, they can leave through the door on the 3rd floor. The mysterious figure reminds once again that after they decide to leave, they will no longer be able to see the window of their destiny. After the room changed completely, the mysterious figure stepped away, leaving them. An hour later, the mysterious figure returned and decided those who stayed would go straight to training. Now they are standing at the main gate. Those who sit inside the altar are told that at least 3 people can enter at the same time into the gate. If their attack succeeded or returned through the gate safely, then they would return to the hall again. Each room requires a different method to conquer it. That method could be checked after entering the room. This mysterious figure continued that the first room had no trial limits, but if they left before they succeeded, then they would have to start all over again. Because I haven't got any points yet. Then he showed the item box provided to everyone. They only need to take 1 before entering the gate in the supply center. If these participants get injured, they can use the healing items they have, or return to the lobby and receive heal from the totem pole. His figure continued that all the participants had indeed signed an agreement that the Protection Agency would not be held responsible for their deaths. But the agency will do its best to prevent that from happening. Then his figure crouched down, saying, "Good luck," then slowly disappeared, leaving the participants. Without waiting for a long time, a young man raised his hand and shouted, looking for people who wanted to join him. Not forgetting that he also said that his strength was primary ghost gray. Everyone else followed his lead. They raised their hands and talked to each other to find a team that matched their strengths. But the Gangrim instead stepped away from the crowd. He had no intention of team scouting at all. It was at this point that Soa called out to him and thanked him for saving him back in the shed earlier. Gangrim was a little surprised to hear this, especially when the girl in front of him asked, "Doesn't Gangrim have a team like her yet?" Without further ado, Soa asked Gangrim, "Does he want to go on a team with her?" Gangrim was dumbfounded with wide eyes hearing Soa's offer. This young man actually thanked him as deeply as possible from his heart. Even his body trembled at the offer. But this young man still remembers the terrible memories of the past during that massacre. and when everyone said that those who are close to the Gangrim will surely die. This young man rubbed his head in frustration every time he remembered those terrible memories. He always blamed himself for the tragic incident that time. Soa was immediately worried seeing Gangrim. He again held his head. He asked, "Is Gangrim okay?" But the young man avoided the first time and said that he refused Soa's offer because he was more comfortable doing everything himself. Gangrim expresses this refusal with a sharp look at Soa, as if he is not comfortable with this girl. After Gangrim said his refusal, the girl in front of him immediately looked awkward. I thought that girl they both matched well, but Gangrim had to keep up his charade and said that Soa could do it with anyone. After that, this young man was allowed to leave. At that time, Soa actually screamed and asked for his help, even though they couldn't hunt together as a team. Finally, with a heavy heart, Seo Gangrim answered, "Yes. In one of the rooms there is a spot to take a supply box. When opened, the box contained weapons and drug supplies. Gangrim thinks that this isn't all that bad, because he can get some items. Meanwhile, to obtain these items is quite difficult. In addition, medicines for healing are quite expensive, and the agency will continue to provide them for the participants." He actually felt that this was pretty good. The Gangrim was tying the sword at his waist. When a man asked him to wait, apparently it was Gokjun who asked to be waited on as the only partner. His bright smile and familiar-sounding words made Gangrim feel a little uncomfortable, especially considering that this incident had never happened in his previous life. Gangrim wanted to ignore it and pretend not to hear. But Gokjun is very stubborn. He runs after the Gangrim and grabs his shoulder to get his attention. Then he asked the Gangrim to join him so they could become the two main protagonists in the story like before. Gangrim shook his head and refused the offer. He said he wanted to go alone to convince Gangrim. Gokjun said that he will not trouble him because he is strong. Gokjun's happy smile really said this didn't change Gangrim's mind at all, because Gangrim knows that Gokjun always categorizes people like characters in novels such as protagonists, supporting characters, and also extras, still vividly remembering that in his previous life, Gokjun treated himself like an extra and looked down on him. So Gangrim thinks that maybe in today's life, Gokjun mistakenly thinks that Gangrim is a strong figure. Then the Gangrim held his chin while thinking, indeed it's easier when you have a strong partner. On the other side of his head, he imagined the strong Soa. But it won't be good if Soa is with her, so he cannot bring Soa. Meanwhile, for Gokjun, since he thinks it doesn't matter if anything happens to Gokjun, Gangrim accepts the offer to go with him. Hearing the young Gangrim's decision, he immediately ran to get the supply box with enthusiasm. When I took the supply box, there happened to be a problem. This young man was still smiling and muttering to himself while taking the supply box. But suddenly he asked Soa, "Why does that girl keep looking at him with sharp eyes?" The smile on Gokjun's face immediately disappeared when he said that Soa looked angry because he was not the hero chosen by the Gangrim. Then, Gokjun immediately left. After saying that, while Soa chose to remain silent and not respond to the words of the young man who was a little strange. The moment the huge gate opened, the presence of monsters could be felt. Then the system screen announced that when Seo Gangrim and Doko Jun entered, they entered the clone floor of Knife Mountain of Hell. In this place, all the rooms are connected by 4 passages. In each passage and room there are traps, even the safe zone. They were also asked to find the right way out. In the middle of the room, Gangrim and Gokjun stood and looked around first. Gangrim wondered, was the structure of the buildings and roads the same as in the past life? So as they were walking down the hall, Gokjun narrowly missed getting stabbed by a sword from a trap on the floor. Luckily, the Gangrim pulled the fussy young man quickly, so that Gokjun was saved from distress. Instead of being scared after almost being stabbed by a sharp big sword, Gokjun actually smiled happily with sparkling eyes, seeing that classic trap. Seo Gangrim immediately left Gokjun, because he was lazy to listen to the unimportant chatter of the young man. They had been walking down the passage for quite some time since the first trap that nearly pierced the Gojun. The two of them had never been caught in a trap again, obviously immediately acknowledging that the Gangrim were very lucky right now. But the Gangrim dismissed that notion, because it didn't take long for something strange to sound from their front hallway. Apparently there was a bunch of skeleton ghosts in their front room. This creature is a monster of human bones. They want human flesh. These monsters have poor hearing and are slightly sensitive to light. Gokjun looks happy to meet this monster, because according to him, this monster is stronger than insects. While Gokjun talks Gangrim using his firepower to attack the monster. Seeing that the opponent was coming, the monster immediately ran after them. They entered the hall. Gokjun said that the entrance is too small. If the monsters gather to block the way, then the monsters won't be able to get out. Gokjun thinks Gangrim is very smart nowadays. Instead of being happy to be complimented by someone, Gangrim actually tells Gongjun to leave if he keeps talking. The two of them were involved in a fierce battle against the skeleton monsters. The Gangrim swiftly swung the sword at the wall, then he flew up and kicked the skeleton beasts all at once. While Gojun dashed forward, he wasn't about to let the Gangrim finish him off alone. So he fought the skeleton monsters quickly, and he thought this battle was very exciting. His mind was really wrong, because only crazy people would look happy while fighting. Until finally they had defeated the monsters in several rooms. Gokjun is getting bored because they keep meeting monsters in every room. Gokjun guessed that they had defeated more than 100 monsters. Then Gangrim asked, "Is the young man tired?" Gokjun answered, "No, because his opponent was just a weak demonic monster, that he learned to fight with a sword just in case one day he goes to another world or transmigrates into a book." Again, Gangrim was surprised to the point of swallowing heavy breaths, hearing Gojun's words, but suddenly Gokjun asked something that made Gangrim absurdly surprised. He wondered, "Is a Gangrim a person who has been reversed or reincarnated?" Gokjun asked with sharp eyes that looked very suspicious. Gangrim tried to deny it by saying that he wanted to leave, if he continued to say nonsense. But Gokjun instead smiles happily because he suspects the Gangrim's denial as justification. Then the Gangrim encourages Gokjun to walk first. He asks the goon to stop wasting time and tells him to go to lead the way as he walks. Gokjun continues to urge Gangrim, because according to him, Gangrim is unique. He is too calm to face enemies and adapts quickly. Even Gangrim seemed to have no fear of demonic monsters. To refute this, Gangrim says he often saw ghosts as a child, so he's no longer surprised when he sees monsters. Gokjun tries to dig up more information by saying that he is very curious about the Gangrim past. He wants Gangrim to tell his past. When suddenly the floor beneath them shook, and the Gangrim fell. The atmosphere became chaotic when Gong wanted to help him. Gangrim instead asked the young man to run away from the trap that had caught him. They actually kept running, leaving the hall where the entire floor collapsed. When he was out of the hall and safe, this young man looked back, staring in horror at the existence of a Gangrim who was probably dead. Gokjun's face turns gloomy when he says that Gangrim might not be the main character. He walked away disappointed because he really likes stories with regression plots. This young man also wondered what will happen to this story next. When he fell quickly from a high enough floor, the Gangrim swiftly drew his sword and stuck it in the wall as a handle so he could safely get to the bottom. When it landed safely below, this youth received notification that he had entered a secret area. Gangrim also received a stern warning that monsters in secret areas were stronger than monsters in normal areas. Each road also has traps and monsters to deal with. The system gives Gangrim the choice to save or surrender. Gangrim ignored the question because he didn't want to give up so easily. Gangrim decides to fight the stronger monsters that come at him, because he could gain more status with this. He has to do this and separate himself from Gokjun because he needs time to develop on his own. The Gangrim immediately ignited the fire in his hand and threw it at the monsters. Fierce battle ensued immediately in this secret area. As suspected, Gangrim's status increases rapidly in this area. After defeating that many monsters, Gangrim's power increased to the 4th stage. This young man was standing on a bed of defeated skeleton monsters, thinking that everything was so easy since the beginning. He raised his start. Gangrim himself didn't expect he could raise his start to this high. On the hologram screen showed that the stamina, ability sense, and magic power of the Gangrim increased slowly. This young man wondered how strong he was now. Regardless of everyone's status starting from the 1st stage, the difference between each stage was the amount of time and effort expended to advance to the next stage. Despite gaining the same amount of experience, the participants' growth rate would be much higher if the class was good. According to Gangrim, people with high-class designs like Dorjun would grow stronger faster if Gangrim kept up with him. He would see Gojun rise stronger than before quickly. This time, Gangrim is determined to be the first to get a clear bonus for doing so. So this young man had to clear things up that very day. So he headed towards the next passage to face the boss monster. It was at this stage before entering the passage, Gangrim realized that the place he was standing on now had a different aura compared to other areas. This young man saw a large iron knife hanging above the passage, as if preparing to behead anyone who intended to escape. This young man breathed heavily, because he felt like he was really in the mountain of swords of hell. Gangrim lit a fire in his hand to see inside. The passage was full of sword blades sticking out ready to stab anyone who passed. Inside this room there are two huge monsters with scary faces named Maria, General. They are monsters mastering sword techniques. They move as if like one person. They will continue to heal if not defeated simultaneously. Gangrim immediately alerted and took out his sword. Looking at the martial general, he was tense looking at the two monsters directly. Even though I've seen it before. The Gangrim even cursed to himself who couldn't stop shaking since seeing the two monsters. This young man was confident that he could defeat them if he could follow his own plan. While thinking, suddenly one of the monsters found a Gangrim. Being surprised, the young man quickly attacked his face to make the monster scream in anger. Then he ran because he was discovered first by the monster. He was happy to get their attention, since the attribute of both monsters was gold. His fire attacks seemed to be very effective on them. Gangrim should be able to buy time. But suddenly one of the monsters slashed the monster's head red face. He did that so that the red-faced monster would not continue to roar in pain, as his body would soon be restored by the system. The Gangrim knew they would continue to kill to heal their wounds. Attacking head-on was useless. So he kept running, trying to lure them to follow him. Gangrim keep running regardless of his body being slashed by the swords that are all over the hall. Keep running until it's a terrible tunnel. Inadvertently, he stepped on a bone and fell down. When it's precarious like this, the Gangrim must do something immediately, because one of the monsters is approaching him. Gangrim made a quick move by burning the rope that was near the passageway door. When it broke, then one of the monsters was slashed by a sharp knife hanging right in front of the hallway door. With this, one monster managed to fall, but one other monster has recovered and is now chasing the Gangrim. This young man ran again quickly towards one of the rooms. Even though he was tense in his heart, Gangrim could breathe easily when he heard the sound of the engine. The Gangrim continued to run fast, until finally the red-faced monster was cut down by the blade trap above the passage again. Now it's the monster with the pigtails' turn to be exterminated. The monster screamed angrily as it entered one of the rooms and found no Gangrim in it, but appeared to tackle the big leg, the monster with his strength that had been increased. Then this young man pushed the SI body of the monster, so that it entered the trap of a giant iron grinder, which immediately crushed the SI monster's body. With this comes a notification that Martial General Human Grade has been defeated, and Gangrim gets a reward for this feat. Not to mention he gets additional start points for defeating stronger opponents. While falling down, this young man thought that he was staying out of this stage, so he completed his challenge. Before that, this young man wanted to confirm something, that it was a monster that took the form of a human. Will he be able to steal his destiny? Gangrim's eyes began to shine when he used his special skill, namely stealing the fate of someone who had died. Will this skill work on humanoid monsters like these two general monsters? After defeating two humanoid monsters, the swordsman Gangrim tries to steal their destiny. So this young man sat crouched while his palms touching the ground to find the number of deaths around his area. Then when the system showed that 2 people had been detected, this young man became very happy. Because that meant he could steal the destiny of humanoid monsters. Before Gangrim met Baekyoung in his previous life, he had almost never used his destiny stealing skill. It wasn't that he didn't want to use it, but more that he wasn't able to use it. His weak body didn't allow this young man to use the ability, especially since the lack of magic energy. He could not trigger this ability. In the past, he often annoyed his team because the Gangrim couldn't use their abilities when needed. There was a limit that the longer time passed after a target's death, the more magic energy had to be expended. Even with what little energy he had left, the Gangrim couldn't activate the ability, unless the target dies right before his eyes. Suddenly crossed his mind, if a human-shaped being, can it steal its destiny? Back then, he couldn't use that ability because he couldn't handle magic in Dungeon Tier and above. Where the monsters were, even no matter how hard the Gangrim tried, he still couldn't do it now. Things were different. This youth managed to rob the humanoid monsters of a portion of their physical strength. He also managed to deprive one of the monsters of his deadly kick ability. Lethal Kick is an ability that can be activated when the user issues a kick, or when the user uses a sword as a weapon. This ability can increase his sword attack to the level of a third devil's ability. Gangrim couldn't wait and immediately tried the deadly kick ability that this young man had just obtained, moving nimbly while swinging a sword which was now covered in quite strong magic. After finishing training, Gangrim noticed that his sword now felt very light. This young man smiled happily to get this very useful ability. Unfortunately, after that, he got a warning for accumulating a large amount of karma. But for Gangrim, it doesn't matter. Because compared to stealing from humans, stealing from monsters won't cause much trouble. Gangrim thought that if the reward was of immense skill, then he might be able to take it. He still clearly remembered that someone who had too much karma would overreach, and such an overreacher was extremely pitiful. With a gloomy face, he thought how close was he to his current limit. Gangrim hits the exit, and with this, he successfully completes the challenge of the first stage. Gangrim walked out of the gate casually. Then everyone was surprised to see that the young man was able to defeat the boss, completing the challenge safely. Gokjun even jump on him. Seo Gangrim cheerfully dodged with lightning. He doesn't want to be hugged by Gongjun, who always looks excited. In between their conversation, a mysterious figure who previously gave instructions approached the Gangrim. He congratulated the Gangrim on the achievement and asked the young man to have a word with him. After Gangrim talked to the mysterious female figure, he got a private room in the training dormitory. The room looked spacious and clean, complete with a large, comfortable bed. Gangrim also got the first prize after doing the first obstacle course. The prize is a small brown bag that can hold any object of any weight or size. Gangrim holds his bag with a happy smile because this is a very difficult inventory item to obtain. The chance to get it for free like this is not to be missed. Then Gangrim put the bag on his waist. Then the young man held a Wi-Fi password in his hand. This is also the prize he got after winning the first stage. With this, he can access the internet and find news about the disasters that are happening out there. Accidentally, Gangrim saw a new news in the post from the Protection Agency. Gangrim quickly watches the news video saying that now in the shelter they are trying to protect the participants who have lost their sense of taste. Seeing the reporter's face that was very similar to Baekhyun's, Gangrim immediately used his ability to read destiny to see the true identity of this woman. Unfortunately, the female reporter's destiny is currently being protected, so Gangrim can't read her destiny. As a result, the Gangrim could only listen as the female reporter advised them not to worry, even if there were changes that would occur in the future. The agency will protect their future, so the female reporter asked them to always believe in the Protection Agency. Gangrim reiterated the last words spoken by the female reporter, that they should trust the Destiny Protection Agency. Gangrim knows that the Agency of Destiny Protection is a place where only the elite among the chosen rankers gather, and all their protection officers hide their identities by covering their faces with masks. If that woman was Baekhyun who had attacked them, it was apparently one of the Guardians of Fate. What to do? Gangrim came to a tense conclusion like this, causing Gangrim to immediately rise to his feet with a shocked expression. He just remembered that she was so strong even though it was so hard to describe. How did everyone in those days not know him? It's definitely possible that he really is from the Destiny Protection Agency. Thinking about that made the Gangrim rub his head in frustration. Meanwhile, on the other hand, in a meeting room, a yellow-haired man as the leader was angry with all his team members. He was annoyed that someone had cleared the stage one challenge in just one day. He was also annoyed that there were people who had managed to clear the secret region and had extremely high destiny and abilities. A figure named Princet scolded his team members as designers to be responsible for preparing the layout of the room. After that, they asked to write an incident report and immediately remove the trap that the Gangrim had managed to pass. The rest, he told his general members to go and exterminate the demons. They all rushed to go and obey the orders of the superiors. After wearing the mask, again leaving the designer who was still busy glued to his laptop. He was dizzy there are participants who managed to trap evil creatures with their own traps. If in the second stage later, it can also be solved in an easy way within a day, then he will have bigger problems than above. If a higher boss finds out that someone who is just building his skills can improve quickly like this, how then can he as the room designer also be in trouble? In the canteen on the first floor of the training center, where the mascots were cleaning the tables and taking away the dirty cutlery. At a corner of the table, Gokjun asks Gangrim, "Does the young man want to go to the second room today?" Because they have a bet that he wants to prove soon. With a moderate smile, Gokjun said that if Gangrim continues like this, then he will challenge the opponent's ability before seeing his ability, which means it will give Gokjun a chance to beat the challenge in the second room. With a straight face as usual, Gangrim said, "Let him do it. He doesn't want to be bothered by Jun Woof, and until Gojun wins, he won't be a Gangrim teammate anymore." So Gangrim told him to leave first immediately. But he refused the offer on the grounds that he wanted to be closer to the Gangrim. Meanwhile, in another corner of the cafeteria, a group of women were having fun talking. One of the women in the group thanked Soa, who stood in the middle, because the girl had saved the first girl's life. Soa humbly said that it was only natural because the short-hair girl was the first to block the attack that was heading towards her. Another girl said that they could probably do it together as a team. Looking at Soa from a distance made a smile on Gangrim's face. There was a thin, sweet smile that could only be present when Soa's presence was detected by her eyes. Gangrim is happy to see that the girl is okay. Then when he saw the group of women, Gokjun said that he didn't really like the main character who was too kind-hearted like Soa. Annoyed hearing Gojun's words, Gangrim threw the young man's head by wrapping candy while in his heart asked Gojun to stay away from him a little. Suddenly a male voice was heard chatting with the girls. At the other end of the room, hearing that sound made Gang immediately turn his head with an annoyed expression. At the table there where the women gathered, there was a man who tried to ask one of the girls' hand, as proof that the girl's hands looked so tiny compared to his own. The innocent girl with brown hair immediately joined her hands with the man's to prove that her hands were indeed smaller than his. After that, with a friendly smile, the gray-hair man said that he could read palms. The other girls looked very enthusiastic, but not so with Soa H, who was busy enjoying his drink. The self-friendly gray-haired man asked for Soa's hand to read, but politely declined the offer. But the young man kept pushing him, and said that this was not an opportunity that comes every day. So slowly the man pulled Soa's fingers to read his palm. Nimble Soa pulled back his hand. It was at this point that the Gangrim came running towards their faces with a very strong aura. The man immediately put on a cheerful expression and offered the Gangrim to have his palm read, with which Gangrim curtly replied that he didn't want that. Gangrim also said that he came to their table only because he had something he wanted to talk to Soa. Gangrim also invited the girl to talk in a quieter place. Sin Soa A's face immediately lit up and she immediately agreed with Gangrim's invitation. Gangrim took Soa to talk in an empty room. As the two of them walked towards the place that Gangrim meant, past two young men who greeted the Gangrim. They say thank you because thanks to Gangrim, they can use Wi-Fi. Apparently the Gangrim posted the Wi-Fi password on his door so that anyone who saw could use the Wi-Fi. From the two friendly people who greeted him, Gangrim realized that the people in his current life quite liked him. This feeling was quite new and surprising to him, as at some point in his previous Gangrim life people had started to shun him and reject him. People at that time refused to go with Gangrim and talk to him. Gangrim was excluded from the others. It was at that moment that a man with gray hair appeared who treated him well. He was Jean Gunam, who had asked the girl's hands for fortune-telling. Gangrim doesn't suspect the young man's kindness at all, so even though Gangrim knows Gunam's abilities, without hesitation he often comes into physical contact with him. Gangrim didn't expect the chance to be used by the Gunam to peek at his abilities and pass it on to all the other participants. Gangrim from previous life started gossiping about this young man. They accused Gangrim of deliberately making other participants die in order to steal their abilities, because that is Gangrim's ability, which is to steal the fate of the dead. He was surprised to hear people's accusations about him. He immediately approached Gunam and said that it was Gunam who leaked the secret of his abilities. Despite having promised Gangrim not to talk about his abilities to anyone, Gunam suspects Gangrim's accusations and doesn't seem to understand what Gangrim is talking about. Even though he was angry, hurt, disappointed, and kept pushing Gunam, the young man still didn't want to admit it, because Gangrim doesn't have any proof that he was the one who spread the secret of Gangrim's abilities, even with the earnest Gunam stares at Gangrim with mocking eyes. Even though Gangrim Tahu Gunam has a mysterious PAL ability that allows its user to read other people's destiny after touching it with the palm of his hand. Until the end, in his previous life, Gangrim still believed that Gunam was the one spreading information about him, because only Gunam knew the name of his skill. In this life, Gangrim not only has to be careful of Gunam, but he also warns Soa to keep a distance not to let Gunam touch his hands, because he has the ability to peek into the windows of other people's destiny through a handshake. Simple. Soa smiled wryly. Luckily, he didn't let Gunam touch his hand. After informing Soa about this, Gangrim wanted to leave the room immediately, but Soa stops him and once again asks if Gangrim would like to go to the second room with him. Gangrim shook his head slowly. He said that Soa would be in trouble if he went with him. All that was in the head of the Gangrim was concern for the safety of the girl in front of him. Soa wasn't satisfied with Gangrim's answer this time. Soa kept pushing for a clear answer. Why would he get into trouble with Gangrim? With a languid face, and without meeting Soa's eyes, the Gangrim replied that he felt less skilled today. Soa fell silent hearing Gangrim's answer. He here says that he never thought of Gangrim as weak. Gangrim tries to give another reason by saying that Soa's abilities were weakened in the previous room, whereas in the second room later it was also the required fire attribute, and Gangrim hinted that Soa's abilities were not really needed in the second room later. Even though the Gangrim had said something quite hurtful, the girl before him was not angry either. Soa actually realized that the second room would be very contrary to his abilities. Even so, he will not retract his offer to invite the Gangrim into the second room together. Soa is very sure about this decision. Finally, Gangrim came out of the room in a hurry. His face looks even more gloomy after saying something that is quite painful to Soa. But the line still thanked him with a very beautiful smile. Meanwhile, in the room, Soa stares out the door absent-mindedly. He thought back to the Gangrim's earlier words refusing to cooperate with him, as if he was keeping his distance from her. Soa wonders why Gangrim told him about Gunam in person, even though he could have just told Soa over the phone. Gangrim could have refused Soa's offer earlier for a different and more painful reason, but chose to be honest and show sympathy for Soa. At this point, so the question is the Gangrim worrying about him? When he came out of the secret room, Gunam was already waiting for Gangrim. He immediately asked if Gangrim had eaten and went to the second room with Soa. While putting his hand in his pocket, the Gangrim replied that he would go alone. This young man immediately went up the stairs without wanting to respond to Gunam Lagi's words. But not giving up either, he offers the Gangrim to work together to enter stage 2. With a friendly smile, Gunam says that he is ranked high enough that he would really go with Gangrim. This young man is not aware that Gangrim is looking at him with eyes of a reader of truth, and now, Gangrim knows Gunam is lying about going with him. Even so, Gangrim still tries to test Gunam's honesty by asking what the young man's abilities are. Gunam replies that he is a shooter who shoots by making bullets out of water and shooting them at opponents. At this point, Gangrim knows that Gunam is telling the truth, so Gangrim will try to give him a chance to go with Gunam. Hearing Gangrim's decision, Gunam gets excited. He ran upstairs to prepare himself and promised to come down soon to meet the Gangrim. This young man with black hair stared at Yus with cold eyes. He wasn't surprised to see Gunam approach him first, like in Gangrim's previous life. It was only natural for Gangrim to curse while looking at Gunam. Finally, the two of them entered the gate of the second stage to complete the challenge. In this second stage, they only have to find ice crystals and return to the lobby. There is no time limit to complete the challenge at this stage. But doesn't that mean this stage has enough difficulty that there is no time limit in it? Upon entering this second room, Gunam immediately commented that this place was exactly like hell, because in front of them lay the river larva flowing in all directions. This river has a high enough heat that the trees cannot grow around it. In this place, Gunam realizes this is the reason Gangrim agreed to join him, because his ability will be very useful in this second stage. Gunam continues to step first. He asks if Gangrim saw a speck of ice in that very hot place, but did not answer the words. Instead drew his sword and glared at Gunam. At the next point, the Gangrim raised his sword high. Seo Gangrim swings a sword to slash, just as Gunam looked back. But it wasn't Gunam who was slashed, but an orange monster frog. He was too shocked to respond and fell to his knees. He didn't expect monsters to appear immediately after the entrance. Gangrim warned that another would come. Looks like a pretty big flock of orange frogs. The frog is called Firefox. This frog is a monster that was born under a volcanic crater. Although his strength is weak, he can attack in groups. This creature eats objects that have a lower temperature than itself as food. Gunam panicked when he saw this flock of frogs. Even so, he still tried to attack with the water he brought. Gunam molds the water into bullets and shoots at the frog monsters. Gunam exclaimed happily as his shot hit several frogs at once. He proudly flaunted that ability to the Gangrim, who didn't seem the least bit amazed. Gunam continues to push back and forth to a location where there are ice crystals. Actually, Gangrim knows where the ice crystals are. But he wanted to take the crystals slowly and see what could be done. Gunam had a smile on his face to imagine Gunam would be exhausted after he was toyed with. When he saw Gangrim's smile, Gundam thought that Gangrim must be happy to have a partner like Gunam. This young man immediately smiled with pride, though that's not the reason Gangrim smiles. A few moments later, Gunam was exhausted because they faced too many frog monsters. This youth was even starting to have an intense headache from losing so much mana. Inside his heart to complain, because in this room there are too many monsters compared to the first room. Gunam couldn't take the headache anymore, so he decided to fight with swords instead like Gangrim. Meanwhile, on the other hand, the Gangrim kept slashing at the frog monsters. Agilely, this young man did not look tired, even though they had gone quite far. When trying to fight the monster with a sword, he actually missed and caused the frog monster to fall on top of him. Gunam continues to complain of heat and calls out to Gangrim as if asking for help. Gangrim sighed heavily. He was annoyed that he had to help people who had been mean to him in the past. But in the present time, Gangrim has to help him first because Gunam hasn't looked like he's ever going to commit a crime. Finally, the Gangrim slashed the frog monster that was bothering Gunam. But the young man stared at Gunam with sharp eyes while asking Guna to return, because he will do it himself. Gangrim doesn't hide his annoyed expression, because Gunam seems to be a burden for his journey. Gunam refuses because he feels he can still get up and help. Gangrim didn't pay much attention to it and just continued on his way. Gunam complained in his heart, because Gangrim was cold to him. While walking slowly, Gunam thinks he purposely made a team with Gangrim to see how great class and abilities Gangrim have. But in the end, Gunam can't see anything because now Gangrim's palms are covered by bandages. Gunapun just stared at Gangrim's back while trying to guess Gangrim's abilities with his skills. But Gunam still can't guess anything, because Gangrim is too mysterious with many things to hide. Even so, Gunam remains curious and wants to check out Gangrim even further. Gunam will wait when Gangrim gets tired and careless. At that time, Guna will spring into action and find out all the information about Gangrim. Gunam thought about all that while resting himself. Sat on a fairly large rock, but when the rock was sat on, suddenly the rock came to life and dropped the Gunam. This young man immediately screamed hysterically, realizing that the monster that was going to attack him was quite large. Luckily, Gangrim swiftly helped by slashing the monster right in front of Gunam's face. Meanwhile, Guna got up and sat down with a pale face. He had forgotten that apart from frogs there must be other monsters in that place. Gunam was truly sorry for letting his guard down and being careless. While Gunam is stunned, Gangrim says that he has saved Gunam's life twice. Gangrim stepped on the crab monster in annoyance while saying that he was very annoyed to have to fight those monsters. In his heart, Gunam was annoyed because it seemed he was being looked down upon by the Gangrim. But in his mouth, Gunam could only smile while agreeing to Gangrim's proposal to move Gunam back to the point of squeezing the ground beneath him in annoyance. In his heart, Gunam kept grumbling about Gangrim's help, which he didn't think was great. Gunam said in his heart that if later his magic power is restored, he will not be finished. Gunam complains about everything. Suddenly the Gangrim turned its head so that it broke the revenge of Gunam. This young man was forced to put on a fake smile again when he thanked the Gangrim for help. They continued their journey until they entered a room inside the cave which was quite spacious. At the far end of the room was a white orb sparkling like crystal. Gunam guessed that it was the ice crystal they were looking for. Gunam smiled brightly, looking at the white ball. This young man thought, just take the white ball to the lobby and everything will be done. But then Gunam realizes there is only one crystal ball. If they take the ball together, then the people in the training center won't know that Gunam got the ball. When Gangrim was busy thinking, Gunam ran quickly to the white ball. Apparently Gunam had the ambition to be the winner, so he didn't think clearly about the challenges at the end of the game. Gunam only thinks about the prize, honor, and awe from the other participants that he will get when he manages to get the crystal ball. Gunam shouts with full confidence that he will get everything, for he is the first conqueror of the crystal ball. But when Gunam held the ball, suddenly the ice ball melted instantly. Gunam was transfixed with a pale expression. Then the system appears and tells that it is a frog egg. Inside the white bag was a lot of firefox eggs. The surface of the object is slippery and difficult to hold, and there's a mother from the frog who will always watch over the eggs. As soon as the notice disappeared, instantly, the land around the mountain turned completely into a larva pond. A lot of firefox that emerged from the pool and immediately attacked Gunam. The young man screamed in pain while calling out to Gangrim, who just stood stiff with a cold expression. Gangrim instead asks why Gunam is still trying to stab him in the back even though he has helped Gunam, and now he still needs Gangrim's help. Gunam kept shouting for Gangrim while begging for help, but with a cold heart the Gangrim stepped away from the cave. He has no intention of looking back and helping someone who intends to bring him down from the past to the present. Gangrim absolutely would not regret this decision of his. Seo Gangrim, who is going into a cave filled with ice crystals. This youth took one ice crystal, then called the shop window to buy something. Seo Gangrim remembers that the requirement to be able to open a shop window is to get a spirit person first. Novice players would normally not know about the existence of shops and spirit persons. But this time Gangrim was able to open the shop window using the spirit jet from the stomach of the worm monster that he first got in the apartment building before coming here. Then Gangrim bought the fire furnace item from the shop window. Gangrim will use this item to get better items, because he didn't have much money to buy the item himself. Then the ice crystals into the fire waiting while saying that the name Siseong Hamji for waiting is quite funny. In the end, Gangrim talks about putting expensive stuff in it, then cupping both palms in front of his chest while begging. Gangrim said in his heart that ice crystals are valuable, and he wants to exchange them for valuables as well. It didn't take long for the Gangrim to open the lid of the furnace, and a bright light came out of it. Gangrim was very happy to see the bright burst of light. But in the end, the fun was gone when all he got was a jar of honey. Gangrim also scattered some more ice crystals and tried to do another exchange. This young man said, if quality doesn't work, he should replace it with quantity. There was so much ice. He wondered if it couldn't bring out a good item. Meanwhile, elsewhere, someone just spat out a loose tooth. Apparently, it was the Gunam who made it out of Larva Lake and blamed the Gangrim. This young man came out with a body full of burnt marks. He will not let go of Gangrim. Gunam vows to stick a knife in the face of someone who looks down on him. It was at this moment that the young man suddenly saw something shining. He was astonished to see it, and immediately took it. Finally, Gunam came out of the second door. He was happy because he had successfully completed the mission and became a conqueror on the first day. The other members applauded, congratulating them on successfully completing the mission. They praised Gunam for successfully completing the mission in just 1 day time. The young man was very happy to get praise from many people. This was the kind of reaction he had expected. Suddenly, Gunam saw Gangrim in the corner of the room. Without much ado, Gunam went straight to Gangrim. Gunam asks why Gangrim is back. He stared at Gangrim with a ghastly expression as he asked, what if he were to run away alone? And what about when he did that suddenly? He was the one who had instructed them to call Gunam from the start. The expression on the young man's face immediately brightened as he turned to the girl. Before leaving, Gunam invites Gangrim to shake hands as a sign of peace between them. Gangrim, who avoided shaking hands with the young man from the start, finally accepted his handshake. Right at that moment, her destiny peeping ability activated. After moving away, Gunam really peeked at the window of destiny from Gangrim. This young man was surprised to see that Gangrim's skill was Fire Elemental and his high-quality weapon item was Lightning Fire King. Gunam is annoyed that that information is all he got. This young man had thought Gangrim had special abilities. Gunam Meng is annoyed to go through all that painstaking trouble just to get some simple information about Gangrim. When Gunam leaves, Gangrim smiles. The condition will be cunning in his head. The man felt good about having the talisman card he stuck in secret. The absence of the card protects part of destiny and makes it unreadable to others. Inside that crystal cave, after he took out the talisman, there wasn't much ice left, so he couldn't prepare some for her. Gangrim still finds ice stuffed into the fire frog's stomach. Gunam is seen explaining how he got the ice crystal to Hanabi near them. There is Jun's shop, who noticed that Gunam was able to complete the mission quickly in just 1 day. After Nabi left, Go-jun immediately summoned Gunam and praised him as an amazing figure, also telling him that he had been trying to enter the gate since a few days ago, but he always failed. This young man also mentioned that the Gangrim were much weaker than he thought. Gunam approaches and confirms that Gangrim is indeed weak. He accuses the Gangrim of running alone because a monster came. Go-jun looks impressed with Gunam because, according to him, Gunam is closer to the main character. Gunam looks even more arrogant and confirms it. Gangrim, who saw the closeness of the two of them, could only smile faintly. The young man saw with his ability that the destinies of Go-jun and Jean Gunam began to intertwine. In his mind, this young man felt a little relieved, because from now on Dogo-jun will stop paying attention to him. Meanwhile, the Gunam ability system screen says this is the worst Sunday compatibility, as bad luck will soon befall Jean Gunam. While climbing the Gangrim steps, thinking that Gunam will definitely be able to take care of Ko-jun's problem. Meanwhile, in a closed room, an emergency meeting took place. Team 2 Seoul, the leader at the meeting, asked Hana again, "Was Cheon Gunam a nobleman?" Hanabi, the girl in charge of beginners, shook her head and answered, "No." Then the leader asked if anyone accompanied him when he entered. Hanabi replies that accompanying her is a trainee named Gangrim. The meeting leader's face grew even more irritated hearing that name again. He feels strange that Gangrim left with Gunam. But Gunam is the only person who cleans the cave. Hanabi tells that Gunam said something strange when he killed the fire frog. Gunam found the frog swallowing ice crystals. Presided over the meeting asked, "Aren't magic beasts unable to access Goa-is?" He also asked, "Hadn't the totem statue been built yet?" Hanabi shows the CCTV footage from inside the crystal cave, where the totem statue is broken and the frog monsters have eaten all the ice crystals. Instantly, the leader Ra's body shook with anger. He blamed Sung Tae, who is considered incompetent at work. But Sung Tae explained he had checked several times and there was no problem before. Sung Tae also argued that the attack this time was faster than expected. That's why they have many talented trainers. Then the leader of the meeting hits the table and asks Sung Tae to take responsibility for his words. The leader confirmed the youth's plan, if there were indeed many talented participants. The leader asked, "Can they go to door 3 now?" Sung Tae could not answer. The leader pressed him, saying, "If any of the trainees get hurt." Would Sun Tae really want to take responsibility? The young man who was asked could only remain silent while lowering his head. The leader reminds that from the 3rd door, later participants will enter the real demon realm. If they entered the 3rd door in a deficient state, all those present could die before the 3rd door opened. The skills of the trainees should be further improved, and Seo Gangrim should be given more attention. Meanwhile, the figure that was being talked about was now standing in front of the gate of the 3rd floor, which was still sealed with lots of ropes and talismans. Gangrim says he really didn't expect this. The system in front of the gate said they postponed the opening date of the 3rd door indefinitely, so details will be announced as soon as confirmed. A few days later, the Gangrim who was picking up food overheard 2 men talking about Soa. Seon Gunam wondered, is the strategy that Jun Gunam gave the right one? The 2 of them were astonished, as the number of attackers had increased by a bit. But most of them are not people who are close to Jean Gunam. They conclude a team with Gunam. Having just woken up, now the 2 left separately. After success, the Gangrim who heard the conversation of the 2 people only smiled faintly. He thinks that Gunam has made a wrong decision this time. Gangrim was actually happy because Doko-jun had left him at this time. Suddenly, a notification on the system screen popped up calling for everyone to gather in front of the 3rd floor's gate until 3 a.m. Seeing this, the Gangrim was even more happy because this was a sign that it was time for him to move. In front of the gate of the 3rd floor, which was still sealed, Hanabi greeted everyone, and she invited everyone to give notice about the 3rd room. First of all, after the notification, Hanabi raised her hand and destroyed all the seals that were in front of the gate. Then Hanabi said, "The 3rd room was officially opened and may be entered by anyone." Everyone immediately cheered, happy to see this. Hanabi explained that the 3rd room was a training ground that was not prepared by the protection agency, so the participants would enter the real Midan. Everyone panicked when they heard this. They are aware means they will be in one place with other participants. Hanabi explained that the situation would be even worse than before. The participants will face wilder beasts with a variety of horrific forms, and of course, in possibly larger numbers. Hanabi also explained that they could get black and white glasses from the gods, who would see directly. The masked girl warned that if the participants heard the voice of God, then don't answer right away. He advised all participants to look at the recently updated instruction manual. Then the participants looked at their respective hologram screens and realized that the manual had indeed changed a lot. There are many new features added, so participants are advised to check them out first. Hanabi closed her notice by hoping that they don't die. The participants even more panicked. Hearing that, some even trembled with fear at the thought of encountering a hideous monster in the third room. While everyone was busy talking with worry, Gangrim even looked dreamy, thinking about something seriously. The young man was so focused on daydreaming that he didn't realize that a girl was approaching him. The girl poked Gangrim and talked to him. Gangrim turned his head and responded in a friendly manner. It didn't take long for the girl's twin to appear. Gangrim smiled happily seeing the two girls. He was reminded of the past in his previous life. At that time, Jangunum spread rumors so that people stay away from Gangrim. Only Soa and these two twin lines interact with Gangrim each. In addition, even though they are twins, the predictions of the two girls are quite different. Gangrim uses his special ability to check the destiny of the twin girls. The first girl named Spring. She has the element of gold, and her ability is 100 cut, where the user can clearly see the point of aim when using the weapon, while the one girl named Yoon Winter. He has a special ability, namely in a middle stroke, where this ability will make his shots never miss. Gangrim was a little depressed because the fate status of the two girls had not changed from their previous life, so bad memories of the two of them returned to reign on Gangrim's mind. Used to be the Spring alive, while Yoon Winter died in this third space. Gangrim suddenly asked if Yoon Winter wanted to go to the third room with him. With enthusiasm, the girl replied that she was willing because she didn't want to hunt with her brother, but Gangrim continues that they will go with young Spring too. In his heart, Gangrim vows to save the girl now. As soon as the gate of the third room was opened, the cold air from the snow immediately rushed to disturb them. The system appears and tells the way to win from the third floor is to kill one or more demons that appear, and they are given 14 days to complete this mission. Gangrim walked through the blizzard while covering his face with his arms. Gangrim ability immediately decreased by 10% since entering the room. The two twin girls behind Gangrim complained of cold in unison. They couldn't even see the notifications on the program screen because the storm was so strong. Right at this moment, the twins saw two rabbits with thick fur. They thought the rabbit was cute, until finally the rabbit rampaged blindly for him. Gangrim managed to beat the rabbits quickly, then he took the rabbit fur to make a coat. Now they were sitting up in a tree looking out the shop window. He comments annoyed about the shop on the hologram screen as it doesn't have a search function. One of the twin girls asked Gangrim, how could he find the online shop so easily? Gangrim replied, because this feature is the same as the game played before. Though in his heart, Gangrim said he used it a lot in the past. Then the twins bought guns for themselves. One had a gun, while one bought a bow complete with arrows. They were very happy because they were now well equipped with weapons. Then the hunt began again. Gangrim and the two twin girls managed to beat some more rabbit monsters. The twins looked happy because they had succeeded in killing the monsters several times. Gangrim saw the twins and realized that Yoon Spring was a sniper, whereas the Winter Union used to be national archers, clearly using a familiar weapon, increasing efficiency when hunting to a more effective extent. Remembering in his previous life being the best sniper if Yoon Min were alive, his developmental level would definitely be the same. Even according to Gangrim, the two of them could be a better team if they were together in their previous life. Yoon became a very different person after the sister who died. The friendly face that was very cheerful at that time never smiled again. He was focused on hunting horses, as if he was taking revenge on Winter. Then Yoon Spring quickly improved his skills and was recruited by Gloomy. Sumurun is one of the 5 major gangster groups. Gangrim thought that it was good to take them both at once, because they can be strong without having to go through such a process again. Gangrim wants to save them both, then wants to bring them in touch with Soa so they can enter the secret room. Gangrim vividly remembers that his previous life as a sniper, but eventually died on the battlefield. This time, the Gangrim is determined not to take his eyes off Yoon. But when this young man looked back, he was shocked, and his face was immediately shocked because Yoon was no longer seen with his twin brother. Then Gangrim and Yoon Spring immediately ran under the snow to find Yoon. He asked frantically, where should they look for his twin brother? Meanwhile, Gangrim keeps running while shouting the girl's name. He said his brother just said he wanted to go to the washroom for a bit, but instead disappeared until finally this girl heard screams from one direction. He also invited Gangrim to check the source of the sound. Apparently, Yoon Gyul shouted for his brother and Gangrim from inside a big enough hole. When seen, the girl explained from down there she needed help to get up. Now, without wasting much time, The Gangrim immediately slid down and asked, "Is the girl okay?" Yoon replied that he was fine, but the person by his side was not. Gangrim turned to the young man on Yoon's side, who turned out to be John Gunam. John Gunam still cursed in his heart because he had to meet Seo Gangrim when he was down like now. But the Gangrim still offers help, even though it is finally rejected in a high tone. John Gunam still thinks more about his own ego than getting out of that hole fast, finally ignoring the young man again and asked Yoon to leave immediately. When lifted up, the girl said that the young man by her side was attacked by a dangerous monster until his legs were paralyzed. A Gangrim suspects that Gunam must have been run over by the rabbit's horn to be paralyzed like that. Gangrim tries to advise Gunam to let go of the horn so he can recover quickly. While walking away, the twins were still talking about the rabbit monster, which was the weakest being on the floor, a creature they had been able to defeat easily. So it was really embarrassing for a grown man to be trapped by that monster. Gunam's body even shook violently because of his mounting anger. This young man hit the ground, swearing he would make Gangrim suffer. Then suddenly a voice came from the sky that confirmed Jean Gunam's words. This young man was even surprised and looked around asking who this mysterious figure was. At this time, Gangrim invites the twins to go back first, because when it gets dark, the level of difficulty will increase. The twins resisted slightly as he thought it would actually improve their skills and become stronger. They can also collect a lot of achievement points and increase the amount. He approaches them and says they don't need to rush hunting, because today is just the first day. Then Yoon asked, "Will Gangrim eat tomorrow? Go hunting with them again?" With a faint smile, Gangrim replied he would go with them until their mission in the room was completed. Of course, the twins were even more excited to hear the young man's answer. Just as they were about to step out of the gate, Gangrim suddenly heard a very familiar scream in his ear. The young man immediately told the twins to return to the restroom first, while he would run towards the source of the sound, and promised the twins would follow. In a corner of the forest was a group of people who were being surrounded by lots of wolf monsters. Apparently one of those people is Soa. The girl kept throwing swords at the monsters while asking her comrades to stay calm. The situation was so urgent because one by one his colleagues who had weapons were defeated by the wolf. Su-ah asked her comrades to hide behind her and protect them with a very strong wall of logs. Then this girl fought alone against those werewolf monsters. Sometimes she fought with a sword. Sometimes she used her tree root ability. In his heart, Soa thought of reducing the number of the wolves so they could survive. But suddenly a wolf attacked the girl from behind and bit her shoulder. The wolf's bite was so painful that it made Shin-shola shed tears. At a critical moment like this, I wished in my heart that one more person could come to my aid and fight against the monsters. Then in the midst of the chaos, suddenly a man slides with a flaming sword, stabbing the biting wolf. He who immediately went on a rampage against the wolf monsters blindly. Gangrim continued to wave his sword, slashing at the visible monsters with cold expressions. Soa didn't stay silent either. He fought monsters that were quite close to him until finally all of them perished, and the fight ended sooner than Soa expected. The girl finally managed to smile with a sigh of relief, not forgetting to thank Gangrim. Strangely this time, Gangrim not only didn't answer, but he even put on a dark face that was so scary. After arriving at the resting altar, Gangrim immediately poured out his anger on the Soa team. This young man asked, "Why don't they just run away?" With a scary face, the Gangrim said that they should have understood the situation was at a disadvantage. The Gangrim made it clear, if they couldn't win, then they would have to flee. They should at least be able to escape unharmed. Soa refused to be scolded and accused of being weak like that. But just as he was about to argue further, Gangrim shouted even louder at him. "Gangrim says that the girl is just being lucky this time." Then Gangrim asked, "What if the monsters that appeared were hiding their true abilities? What if he doesn't show up to help?" In his heart, Gangrim hoped that seeing death was only once in his life. Then, with all his might, Gangrim shouted to Soa, "If she wants to protect someone, she should be strong enough to protect herself." Then quickly the young man turned around and walked away. He advised Soa to remember his advice well, because if he was not careful, he would die in this place. Soa's fellow girls immediately approached to comfort her. They didn't expect Gangrim to be so rude to Soa. Even so, Soa kept smiling and asked his comrades not to worry, because after all, it was Gangrim who really came to save him. Soa said in his heart that he didn't know why Gangrim kept pretending to be a bad person, But the girl said out loud that Gangrim was a very friendly person. Shin Soa also called Gangrim's name out loud, then thanked the young man for his concern. Seo Gangrim could only swallow a heavy breath, then told Soa to do whatever he wanted. The next day, Seo Gangrim continued to hunt in the third room with the twins. They had killed so many monsters that the numbers were 10 to 10. They had finally cleared the third room challenge. The twins saw the notification, and both realized that they were done. Twins asked, "Will Gangrim go now?" But the young man smiled faintly, and said that he would stay with the twins till the end. Of course, the twins jumped for joy at Gangrim's answer. Deep inside, the Gangrim thought that once the raid was over, no one would enter this room again for a while. At that time, the Gangrim planned to go alone, because there was something he wanted, and he could get it only after hunting 11 types of monsters, because it was a hidden raid reward. The twins kept joking while running around. Gangrim just stood by watching them. This young man was a little worried that the attack point was faster than in his previous life. So Seo Gangrim used his special ability to see destiny. With this, he could feel the energy of the white tiger up close, and could feel the aura of nearby monsters. Gangrim is shocked that there are other people around. He was also reminded of the bad fate that will befall often appear around him, as if to harm him. Starting to think about cleaning it now before leaving, Gangrim told the twins to stay where they were and wait for him to come back, for he is going to stake out the hill for a while. Twins with a compact answer, they are willing to wait. Gangrim also stepped alone towards the cliff he wanted. This young man thought that if the twins came with him, it would be quite a complicated matter. Not far away, Jean Gunam stood up and greeted Gangrim. The young man said that he had been looking for the whereabouts of Gangrim since earlier. Gangrim also asked why he was looking for him. Then Jean Gunam raised his palm, which now can control ice crystals. Seo Gangrim says just like Gangrim humiliated him last time, Gunam will turn things around. With a mocking smile, Gangrim asked, "Does Seo Gangrim have the ability to do that?" Gunam raised his hand so that the grain of paper quickly awakened to a bluish light in his hand. This young man confidently said, "He is the main character, because he has heard God's voice." Gunam raised the crystal in his hand and smiled mockingly, as he asked the Gangrim to prepare to face its power. This youth threw a crystal stone which instantly multiplied and attacked directly at Seo Gangrim. Seeing Jun Gunam's attitude reminds me of Hanabi's words that the gods will watch while they hunt in the demon world. From here, Gangrim knows Jean Gunam has been possessed by a Lord Shiva. Gangrim uses his ability to see the destiny of the youth in front of him, so that a window of Gunam's destiny is seen which is now possessed by a god named Small Guest Plague. Jean Gunam continues to attack with a smile. He said he was the main character, so naturally, he was chosen by God. Those who ally with gods are said to be entitled to powerful abilities from that position. Inside his mind he felt a little relieved because at least the god who possessed Gunam was still at a low level, and also saw that Gunam had improved a bit and got more abilities, namely the ability of a smartphone. Borrows the power of a god to infect opponents with smallpox when hit. When the ability is activated, the affected part will be infected with smallpox. Gangrim quickly smiled seeing the description of that ability. According to him, it was a slightly annoying ability. Gangrim decides to reduce gunman management first. So the Gangrim burned the trees that were around them while running. Gunam chases and screams, "No Gunam, huh?" He runs away as divine punishment will chase the Gangrim to the ends of the earth. Suddenly a large herd of wild boars passed to block them. Jean Gunam was annoyed because the herd of pigs had made the distance between him and Gangrim even further. He kept trying to attack by throwing ice crystals, but always miss. Gunung continues to run while shouting to order the wild boar to step aside suddenly. The young man was stabbed by a wild boar and fell covered in blood. At a critical moment like this, John heard the voice of the god who said he had come to that place because he heard there were humans. But they sounded irritated that humans weren't even strong. The others shouted that it was fitting for a low-class god. Jean Gunam was shocked to hear the voice of another god watching him. The youth asked in a trembling voice, "Was his suffering amusing to the gods?" Gangrim comes and stabs him in the shoulder with a sword. They are pressed for time. Gunam welcomes the name of the god Cell 1 and asks the god for help. But while drawing his sword, Gangrim asks, "Is Gunam's revenge over?" Because he doesn't like the Gunam constantly roaming around him. Then Gangrim drew a sword beside Gunam's head while saying, "You did that because you already knew the risks, right?" Before the Gangrim finish him off. One of the twins shouted for him. Gangrim stuck a sword in the side of John Gunam's head, saying, "The young man is lucky now because next time he will definitely kill Gunam." The twins run to find Gangrim as there is a big problem. The girl says a herd of snowboars came running and took Yoon. Seo Gangrim was stunned with a pale face when he heard that. This young man recalled the words of the fortune teller, who said his destiny was unfortunate and full of evil energy. Because of that, many people would get hurt when they were near him. Starting from his parents died, and wherever he goes, there will definitely be someone who dies. He continued to shake Gangrim's body, which was fixated with guilt. He felt unworthy to be able to save someone. But a second later, this young man realized and ran looking for Yoon. Gangrim kept walking until he left the twins behind. When he woke up, Gangrim immediately asked the girl to come back first. But you were still stubborn, he wanted to go along. Even though Gangrim snapped and told him to come back, this girl still insisted on coming along. Because the Gangrim had forbidden her to go alone with her face covered in tears. This girl asks how she can come back alone when Yoon might be in danger. Finally, Seo Gangrim decided to let him come, but with a note that he had to come back if it got dark, or it was too dangerous. They continued through the blizzard while following the trail of wild boars. While walking, Gangrim thinks about how Yoon died in his previous life. But he assumed that if Yoon was in danger, she must be somewhere around here. Join Spring started complaining because there were no monsters in that place. Within Gangrim's mind, in this place there were no low-class monsters, because they don't dare step on predator territory. Suddenly heard the sound of footsteps that made them quickly hide. Apparently it was the footsteps of a Yeti monster. It was a human-like monster covered in fur all over its body. They only appear before humans on snowy days. This monster wants to fight anyone stronger than it. He was taken by the Yeti monster as well as Yoon, who immediately wanted to point his gun at the monster. But quickly the Gangrim pulled the girl to hide again. This young man covered Jun Spring's mouth and held his gun so he wouldn't act rashly. Gangrim ordered to wait. Then he used his peeking ability of fate to check, has anyone died around them? Luckily that ability doesn't detect dead people around them. Gangrim can breathe a sigh of relief after doing this. Seol Gangrim says they will put Jun Bintang in danger if they fight that monster now, so they better hide and be patient. They had to be patient waiting for the monster, put the Yun Min first, then they climbed up the cliff above the Yeti monster's lair. Here he asks if they attack. After the Yeti puts Yoon down, the Gangrim says no. The young man advises them to avoid fighting the monster, so Gangrim gives Yoon a flare gun to attract the attention of the Yeti monster. Seo Gangrim told the girl not to fight and keep running, because he was the one who would take Yoon, while Yoon does his part. Then the Gangrim slid down the cliff slowly. This young man concluded in his mind that with the agility of the Union Spring, he should be able to run away from the Yeti quite easily. As the Gangrim ordered, Yoon raised his weapon high, until he saw the Yeti monster put down his brother. After that, this girl fired her weapon, which gave off a bright light. The curious Yeti immediately ran towards the source of the light. After that, he immediately left. Yoon was running over the cliff while the Yeti monster was provoked. Gangrim immediately ran to the nest and approached the unconscious Yoon. The young man tried to call him and ask him to wake up, but no response at all. For now, Seo Gangrim can't give him any medicine, so he has to bring Yoon. But suddenly, the young man's steps stopped when a large shadow appeared. Apparently, it was the shadow of another Yeti monster. Gangrim was shocked because he didn't know there would be one more monster. This Yeti monster has a red body and a scar on its face. He looks scarier than the previous monster. The monster directly attacked the Gangrim, who tried to resist with the small fireball in its hand. Inside his mind, Gangrim was cursing because of his really bad luck. Yoon keeps trying to lure the Yeti monster by firing a flare gun, but it explodes. The Yeti monster turned around and ran back to its lair. He panicked and kept shooting flare guns while screaming. The monster should be chasing him. Then this girl asked the Yeti monster to come back after her. Meanwhile, near the nest, Gangrim G are still busy chasing away the red Yeti. Gangrim really felt he had no luck in his destiny. While carrying Yoon, this young man kept dodging the Yeti's attacks as best he could. But suddenly the Gangrim heard the sound of big footsteps from another Yeti monster. This young man was panicked by two monsters at once. Luckily, he managed to jump from the second fist attack of the monster. Then Gangrim put Yoon's body in the middle of the nest and he set fire to the nest to protect Yoon. Inside the Gangrim's head, the only thought was to return to hunting as a way out. Then this young man spoke to Yoon to hold on a little longer, because he will hunt monsters, Before going, the Yeti monster roared and ran towards the Gangrim, this youth dexterously swinging a sword while devising a tactic that would surely succeed. Gangrim dashed away from the nest with great agility. He deliberately provoked the Yeti monsters to hit the ice beneath them. Gangrim deliberately jumped on top of one Yeti's body so that the other Yeti would hit his partner, and it worked because of the two Yetis' strong punches. The ice beneath them collapsed and knocked over a Yeti. Gangrim gets a notification from the system that he has successfully defeated a Yeti monster. Finally, Gangrim can breathe a little easier. Gangrim remembered that in this demonic realm, there are many areas consisting of snow and ice, and they tend to collapse easily, like the area Yunmin fell yesterday. Gangrim saw that there was one Yeti monster still hanging in the ice. Gangrim was sure that this creature would soon fall and would not be able to climb back up. But when Gangrim was about to run away, suddenly the monster hit back the ice so hard that the young man fell too. Luckily, he was saved by tree roots that suddenly appeared underneath him from the top of the hole. Soa, who came with the tree roots, said, "If you let your guard down, you will leave the training facility as a dead person." Soa added he was happy, because it was not late to come. While flashing an awkward smile, the Gangrim thanked the girl. Then Soa reminded him to thank Yoon because he was the one who came looking for Soa. Soa also pulled the Gangrim up, but the young man wanted to go down first for a moment. After he went upstairs, he looked panicked, waking his brother who was still unconscious. Seeing this, the Gangrim became dejected. He guessed that his attempt failed because he was late. Gangrim asked in his aching heart, "Can he fight the fate that they must meet?" They smiled when they saw the little girl in front of him opened his eyes and complained of being cold. Yoon regained consciousness and asked for a warmer. Immediately, Yoon and Soa ran up to the girl with a smile. They were very happy because Yoon was apparently still alive. Gangrim was stunned to see the girl opened her eyes again. A red system screen appears telling the Gangrim that the White Lion's death aura has disappeared from Yoon. This young man immediately ran towards them, but at that moment he received another notification that the predetermined fate had changed. Gangrim gasped in shock as he read the notification, especially when the system screen reappeared and announced that the Seo Gangrim system class had been upgraded to secondary insectile grade. Gangrim really didn't expect that the window of his destiny would change. This young man thought he could not change his destiny class. Suddenly he came to hug Gangrim and thanked him because thanks to him Yoon was still alive. While hugging Gangrim and hiding his face, he kept thanking the young man. Meanwhile, Soa is giving medicine to Yoon to quickly restore his physical condition. Gangrim smiled brightly, seeing one thing: his destiny had changed. In his mind, this young man said that the most important thing now is that Yoon is still alive. Meanwhile, on the other side of the cold pole, Gunam is trapped into an ice crevice. He looked angry because the lowly god was no longer able to help him. Gunam even cursed at the god and said he shouldn't have chosen the god who gave him the disease. Finally, the god thought Jun Gunam's attitude was excessive and left him. Panicked and kept calling the god, but again no answer. Now Gunam accuses Gangrim of being the main villain. He invites the Gojuns to attack Gangrim together. Gojun even said that if Gunam was indeed the main character, then he should be able to handle this easily. But in fact, Gunam even lost to a Gangrim. When Gunam wanted to argue, Gojun suddenly interrupted while saying, John Gunner couldn't reveal his true strength because he was with Gojun, so John Gunam must not be the main character. But Gunam insists that he is the main character, and asks for help to get out of this gap. But with a cold face, Gojun says if he is the main character, then he should be able to get out on his own with it. Gojun turned around and prepared to leave the road. No matter what he said before taking a step, Gojun glanced coldly at Gunam, saying that the young man is not the main character, so he doesn't need to be bothered to be able to help an extra. Of course, Gunam was getting panicked hearing that. He repeatedly asked for help to be released. He even screamed hysterically, but still the Gojun never looked back again. Meanwhile, Seo Gangrim kept on swinging his sword to slash the goblins that came towards him. This young man was being surrounded by so many goblin monsters, right when this young man was resting. The twins called out to him, and as usual boasted about their accomplishments. After killing several monsters, Gangrim smiled, seeing the twins who were fine. But all that did not last long when suddenly, there was a white-haired girl who immediately threw a sword at the twins. Even though the twins managed to escape, they were still surprised that the figure that had just arrived was Baekyoung. The white-haired girl once again said, "She will free everyone if she gives Gangrim to her." The twins try to fight the girl with the weapons they have, run and prevent the twins from fighting Baekyoung. However, Seo Gangrim was held down by the goblin's huge and monstrous arms. Gangrim was held back by dozens of goblin monsters, so he couldn't save the twins. In a pool of blood, the twins asked, why should Gangrim be in their lives? Because if not for the young man, they would have survived. When pressed and panicked, someone spoke from behind his back. Apparently it was Soa from the past who asked the Gangrim not to forget that he was the one who killed him. Then Gangrim is washing his face in front of the sink, saying that the incident just now was just a bad dream. Gangrim kept musing that such a future would never come again, as he would not let it happen again. Seo Gangrim started to think the dream was a warning to him for getting too close to the three of them, especially since that day the twins thought Gangrim was a savior for them, so that their destiny was bound to Gangrim. Now Seo Gangrim thought of distancing himself from them again. That's why he refused when the twins asked them to leave with the excuse he had things to do as soon as possible. Gangrim is not even affected, though. They say Soa is also coming with them. Gangrim instead thought they were so close to Soa that he never worried about the twins again. Even though the twins forced him to go to the 4th floor, Gangrim still refused, making the twins sad. Before leaving the room, Seo Gangrim Yoon noticed that the youth had been avoiding them ever since the incident in the 3rd room. Yoon guessed that he must have his reasons. The two of them immediately approached Soa and said that Seo Gangrim did not want to come with them. Finally, Soa opened the gate and said they couldn't do anything else and had to go to the 4th room, all three of them. In this 4th training room, the terrain is a forest of swords. The missions to complete are hunting monsters and collecting boat spirits in the forest. The number of spirits that must be collected is 1,000. As usual at the beginning, the twins are always full of enthusiasm. Especially this time, Medan is a dense forest that is cool and shady. But Soa asks him to be careful because someone is coming. They looked here and there, but in fact, only the wind and leaves were blowing. Strangely, the leaves that come are able to cause scratches on their hands. Soa fends off leaves and thinks it's the forest itself that's dangerous in this 4th room. The system explained that the sword forest room was an endless forest. Winter complained a little because they had to collect so many pearls, but Soa asked them to go around first. While on the road, they kept talking about Seo Gangrim. The twins thought things would be easier if the young man was around. At this point, Soa also felt Gangrim away from them, even though it was very good to the twins. With a mysterious smile, Soa thought the young man had his own way of speaking and treating people. But he is clearly a good person. Soa suddenly shouted at Winter because he felt something. Right at that moment, the young girl was hit by an attack until it bled. Meanwhile, in his room, Gangrim is busy sitting facing a mysterious egg that has a mouth. This young man said the egg was more terrible than he had heard. This egg was named a non-egg. The class is not yet clear because it can only be decided after this egg hatches. These eggs will hatch after a few years. His appearance will also change based on what is fed from his master. It is still unknown what will hatch from the egg. Seo Gangrim received the egg as a reward for slaying Yeti monsters as the 11th type of monster. What hatches depends on what the Gangrim feeds the egg. For a while, this young man tied the mouth of the egg with a cloth, even though he already knew what monster he wanted to get. But Gangrim still hadn't fed him, and apparently Gangrim wasn't the only one who got the mysterious egg that day. When the Gangrim approached the Yeti's body, he tried to use the power of peeking at his destiny, and then stole the Yeti's destiny, which took the ability of water. Then Gangrim immediately tried to change his ability, which was actually fire, into water. In an instant, slowly bursts of fire eroded by the bluish water. Then the system screen says water wins over fire, so the Gangrim start, which had decreased, has now returned to normal. Gangrim is happy to see this notification. Gangrim to the point of not buying proper weapons to use in the ice room, for the sake of buying food that is tolerant of the water attribute. Gangrim can now smile happily while nailing the egg, because he can choose weapons in the next realm. Then Seo Gangrim finally entered the 4th room. Gangrim, who finally entered the Forest of Swords. As soon as this young man entered, he heard the voice of a god who was busy talking about him. Noticing this, the Gangrim thought how low-grade gods below were, that he could hear their conversation right away upon entering. Although Gangrim tries to ignore them, Gangrim opens a system window and wants to cut off communication so as not to hear the gods talk. But the gods were happy because the Gangrim could hear them. Unfortunately, Gangrim can't cut off communication because they have to use enough spiritual power. He got a little annoyed because of this. Suddenly, one of the gods offers to possess Gangrim. But this young man ignored it instead, because he was sure that it was just a lowly territorial god. A territorial god is a god who rules over a certain area. By owning a god's territory, you can become stronger than anyone in that god's territory. But gods were tied to their territory, so once a player left that territory, it would be of no use. The room was nicknamed the Mess of Sword Forest. Gangrim doesn't have to worry about getting lost if he accepts possession, but he doesn't need that now. Because Gangrim has bought the map from the online shop, this young man said the map was all that was needed to show the way. There are no clues on the map yet because only an outline is shown. But the more you go around the area, the more places will be marked on the map. There are several entrances to the demo knee ground. He wondered, was he approaching the fourth area? The participants at the training institute were divided into various fields. But in the next room where people are critical, the attack will start with the trainees from other areas. While the Gangrim was thinking about this and entered the map, one of the gods spoke again and offered to help him find something, as long as the Gangrim was willing to be possessed in his mind. Knew they were controlling the amount of people that came into the room to keep them from opposing each other, while thinking the voices of the gods kept bothering the Gangrim. So this young man got impatient and asked them to stop because he would not accept it. Instead of giving up, one of the gods instead used the suppression message activated for 10 minutes to promote themselves to Gangrim, resulting in an image of the god master of all flames recommending himself to take it. This fiery fire elemental god carries 2 large swords and has 4 arms. The system asked if Gangrim would accept the god. The god of fire was still promoting himself and saying the gods who were now connected were nothing compared to him. Gangrim was a little surprised to see the promotion notification and the image of the god. That god also said that humans who had the fire attribute could be strengthened. Coincidentally, Gangrim's attribute is fire. But this young man just held his breath while thinking this was quite touching. Even so, Gangrim still not interested in accepting it. Feeling ignored, the god asked why the Gangrim didn't answer his question, so finally the god could only give up watching the action of Gangrim in the forest. Gangrim against many mantis monsters. He managed to collect spirit pearls 3 out of 1,000. In his mind, Gangrim remembered he had to collect those 1,000 spirit pearls. It didn't mean he had to hunt 1,000 monsters because there were several classes for each pearl. 1,000 points for 1 pearl from a worm monster, then 334 points for 1 pearl from a praying mantis, and 100 points for 1 pearl from a goblin monster. In his previous life, Gangrim killed many mantises due to his lack of skill in pearl gathering techniques. But this time he didn't have to, because each monster counted 10 points. As he was walking, suddenly Gangrim stepped on a pool of red blood as soon as he noticed that there were traces of traps as well. Gangrim wondered, why is there blood in that place? For none of the mantises he defeated had red blood. Gangrim suspects that a mysterious figure with a mask has started moving in Gangrim's previous life, who was the target of assassination. A very dangerous masked person in this 4th room. Soa saved himself, because coincidentally the girl was also in the same room. But in the end, the girl had to lose 1 eye while saving Gangrim. After that, the mysterious figure ran away, and Seo Gangrim never found out who he was. Seo Gangrim immediately ran with all his might while thinking, is it only the Soa and Gojun group in the room? Gangrim was very worried if the blood belonged to someone he knew. Until finally, he saw a girl lying on the ground and being surrounded by many people. Seo Gangrim immediately panicked and aimed his weapon at the people. This young man asked people to stay away from Yoon Winter, who was lying in pain. Meanwhile, in the meeting room, the bespectacled leader asked his members, has the trainee who disappeared from the ice room returned? Hanabi said the trainee named Gunam had not returned. The leader guessed the man must be dead. The leaders had little hope for him since he was the first to clear the room of fire. Hanabi asked, should she go look for the young man? The leader replied that it was not necessary, because they could not intervene in matters related to the demon world. Besides, from the start, the participants had already signed a pact in case there was a risk of death. After the meeting was over, one of Hanabi's colleagues asked why the girl looked so guilty. Apparently there was something else bothering the girl's mind. When she checked the personal data of today's trainees, Hanabi saw from one of the trainees that there was a serial killer. Gangrim seems to have known that too. Because of that, He is very paranoid when a stranger approaches someone close to him. He doesn't even hesitate to point a sword at the neck of a strange man who intends to help Yoon. Seo Gangrim also uses the ability to peek at destiny to see the status of the destiny window of each foreigner who is there. Meanwhile, the man holding the antidote bottle says he is healing Yoon, and the bottle he is holding is the antidote. This young man named Nam. Yoon, after seeing the status window of strangers there. Gangrim also asked them to lower their weapons. Gangrim saw Jun Winter and realized that the girl needed an antidote, but this young man was still afraid. Those foreigners would give poisoned units instead. So with angry face, he asked, "How can Gangrim trust those strangers?" Suddenly, Soa came with Yoon and another girl. Soa explains to Gangrim that the people around him are not enemies, so Seo Gangrim asks what exactly is going on. The foreign woman who came with Soa was willing to explain. Apparently Yoon walked into a trap their team had set to hunt monsters. He was really sorry because he didn't know any other team around the area. They intend to take care of Winter. After releasing all the traps around their area, Seo Gangrim stared at the girl with sharp eyes. He remembered well the mysterious assassin used to be good at using poisons and traps too. Gangrim knew the woman who was standing before him was stronger than any of his members. However, because of his ability to use poison and traps, he is even more worthy of suspicion. Then Nam Yoon Jun gave the antidote to Yoon, even though the Gangrim had kept his sword back. The young man couldn't stop being wary of the foreign team. Soa and Yoon are relieved to see Winter has got the antidote, because the treatment is over. Gangrim immediately takes Yoon to leave. In his mind, even if there was no killer among the foreigners, it would still be dangerous to go with the people from the fourth room. So Seo Gangrim picked Yoon up and carried him away from the foreign group. Now they set up camp in another corner of the forest, for it was getting dark. Yoon holds Soa's arm because he's worried he's never made camp in the wilderness before. While they were chatting, Gangrim threw a purple orb that gave off a strange scent. The twins asked what it was, and Seo Gangrim explained it was an item to ward off monsters. He got the item after purchasing it from an online shop. The twins were so amazed by Seo Gangrim's abilities and intelligence that they asked the young man to become their teacher. Gangrim was shocked to hear that. Yoon said he was more worthy of being a Gangrim student, while Yoon felt more worthy of being his first student. The twins began to busy arguing over who is better to be a student, making the young man could only smile a little. The commotion in front of him looks cute. Finally, Gangrim replied, he will not teach anyone and will not appoint anyone to be his student. Suddenly, the voice in Gangrim's head reminded him again not to get too involved with the three of them, so Gangrim stood up and immediately ran away, making the three people who were there look at him with surprised eyes. Gangrim even said in a cold tone that it was too noisy and he would leave. The three people there also started to get depressed seeing the distant attitude of the Gangrim who was back away from them. The Gangrim rubbed his head in frustration. His head was a mess. So Rio asked why he couldn't stay away from the three of them. Moreover, he still had something to do. Gangrim took out the mysterious egg and forced it to eat tree leaves, but the mysterious egg melted back the leaf Xiao offered. He only wanted meat. Even so, the Gangrim continued to force the eggs to eat enough leaves and branches of trees. Finally, Seo Gangrim approached the camp again and watched them from the tree. The gods were again busy asking Gangrim, why did the young man decide to come back? The gods consider Gangrim to be a tsundere, which means Gangrim cares about his comrades, but doesn't like to show that concern in their presence. Hearing the constant talk by the gods nearby made Gangrim both irritated and embarrassed. But the Gangrim finally just gave up and sat in a tree watching his comrades. Seo Gangrim smiled, seeing the twins still fighting, getting this young man's insignificant things back. Remembered the memories of his previous life. He and Harang used to fight like that all the time, and Soa always smiled when he saw them act like that. That's their normal, fun life. Back then, Seo Gangrim would be too busy in this life, but he thought the Flying Tigers sect would also be bustling in this life as well. It was indeed a bit bitter, because the scene right now was so sweet and warm, but he couldn't join them. Suddenly, this young man smelled a sweet aroma. He immediately tensed because from a distance he saw 3 bear monsters approaching his friend's camp. Then Gangrim jumped into the middle of the camp to find the source of the sweet smell. His appearance made Soa surprised. Soa asked what the young man was looking for until finally Gangrim found a peach on the ground. He asked if anyone had come to their camp. Gangrim saw that the fruit was a peach that monsters usually enjoy. It was the fruit that attracted the monsters with its scent. Gangrim looked around and noticed there were no peach trees around their camp. It was certain that someone had purposely placed the fruit around the camp to lure out the monsters. Gangrim suspects that the one who planted the fruit is the mysterious killer who has the power to hide himself. This young man put the peaches in his utility bag first. At this moment, the twins told me that the Gojuns had just passed by and were looking at them with sharp eyes. The twins tell to Gojun just passed about 1 hour ago, when he thought that Gojun was the culprit. The look in Gangrim's eyes immediately turned weird. He himself could not guess what was in the mind of a madman like Gojun. Finally, Gangrim told his comrades that there were many fruits that attracted monsters around the camp. They immediately knew someone had deliberately put those fruits around them. Yoon asks who would have the heart to do that to them. He wasn't sure exactly who the culprit was either, but what was clear was that they had to be wary of everyone in the future. Then Gangrim will take care of the fruits. When suddenly he felt the presence of someone who immediately disappeared in an instant. On the other side of the Gojun forest, fighting the monsters with cold eyes. This young man felt very bored because the storyline of their journey feels like garbage. No rival, friend, or foe, and not even a god or hero could catch this man's attention. Gojun looked up at the sky and asked, what exactly was his role? Then he thought back to the twins' conversation about Seo Gangrim, who managed to defeat the Yeti monster. Gangrim managed to defeat a boss-level monster that no other character had ever encountered. This young man also realized Seo Gangrim was the first person to successfully clear the ice room and save someone. Gojun started to wonder, why can a tough guy like Seo Gangrim get beat by Gunam? Until finally, this young man realized that pushing Kion Gunam towards him was Gangrim's trick from the start. This young man wildly deduced that Gangrim was someone who came back from the future, so he knew all the strategies and rewards there were. And Seo Gangrim from the start just wanted to get rid of Gojun to take all the gifts for himself. Gojun's eyes turned sharp at the thought of this. Now he has found the missing puzzle piece. Then, without wasting any time, Gojun ran as hard as he could looking for Seo Gangrim. Seo Gangrim himself was looking at the map and walking through the forest where 35% of the route had been found. As he walked, the gods kept talking and asking Gangrim, didn't he want to exchange ideas with the gods? However, this time Seo Gangrim replied in a cold tone that they couldn't even tell him about who put the peaches. But the god said he didn't see anyone. Clearly the Gangrim could not believe the words of the god. Then this black-haired young man resumed his steps while looking around carefully. Seo Gangrim was so focused on searching until his science increased to class 25. Suddenly Gangrim smelled human blood. He immediately activated his destiny-stealing ability to detect corpses around his territory. No, how far did this young man see someone covered in blood? But instead of helping, Gangrim even pointed a gun at that person. Luckily, the mysterious man got up in time and managed to fend off Gangrim's attack. The man with the mask said, if anyone faints, especially help instead of pointing a gun. Seo Gangrim snapped at the masked figure and told him to be quiet. Finally, the mysterious man took off his broken mask. He asks, how did Xiao know he would kill his 3 comrades? Apparently, the mysterious masked figure who killed the players was Hyun. This young man has a new ability, namely the murder impulse, which is able to absorb the statistics of anyone killed by his own hands. Gangrim cursed inside his heart, as his opponent's stats had now increased by leaps and bounds since the last time he read his window of destiny. Now they are involved in a fairly fierce battle. Gangrim had asked how many people he had killed. With a bright smile full of pride, the young man replied, he had killed enough people. Gangrim became even angrier when he heard that. He asked if it wasn't enough to just hunt monsters. Namjoon replied that hunting monsters was also quite fun, which was why he had remained silent all along. But eventually one of the gods gave him a power that can activate after he kills a human. Gangrim is getting angry, hearing the reason is just that. But Namjoon is still proud of the power he has, and accuses Seo Gangrim of definitely using that ability, even if he has to kill someone else first. After saying this slowly, Nam Yoonjun's body disappeared with his special ability. Gangrim scolded Yoonjun with angry eyes. He did not accept that criminal brain. Seo Gangrim sharpened his senses to sense Jun's whereabouts, who again disappeared. This young man closed his eyes and thought that Namjoon may not be seen, but that doesn't mean Yoonjun really disappeared. Thanks to sharpening his senses, Gangrim can fend off Yoonjun's attack. this youth could also sense a bloodthirsty desire that made him easily found. Namjoon smiled happily, because there was someone who could withstand his attacks. Because of this, he thought Gangrim wasn't too bad. Instead, it would be even more exciting. According to him, he fought Gangrim with passion. Yoonjun wondered how much stronger he would be after killing Gangrim. He was getting excited to fight Seo Gangrim because he had this thought in his mind. Gangrim was getting restless. He was worried that this would not work because he had never used that skill before. But the ability he stole from Yeti at that time might be able to help him defeat Namjoon. That ability is Fighting Instinct. With this ability, one will burn with the desire to fight. If the opponent is stronger, the start will be increased on par with the opponent. So the stronger the opponent, the higher the start. Seo Gangrim's heart pounded as he activated this ability. Because his opponent was stronger the instant he was incinerated by his overwhelming fighting instincts. Yoonjun was surprised to see Gangrim's aura starting to change, but he didn't understand what was really going on. Seo Gangrim looked at Yoonjun with a terrible expression, and of course, it was very disturbing. Gangrim continued to launch attacks with gusto. He thought it would be great to kill Namjoon. That ability really took away his sanity. With this skill, he even managed to urge Namjoon and create a wound on his body. Because of urgency, Namjoon tried to attack Gangrim's body sitting on top of his body. But even though the attack hit Gangrim, he didn't dodge and kept swinging his sword on June. Clearly, this young man was afraid to see the extremely strong killing aura from the Gangrim. But just as Gangrim is about to stab him with a sword, someone screams and catches the Gangrim's attention. It turns out that the figure who just came is Gojun. He screamed to help Gangrim, but in fact he made Gangrim's attention on him and made him lose Jun. Gangrim looked at Gojun with scary eyes like a psychopath who wants to kill anyone, especially now that he saw Gojun much stronger. Instantly, the Gangrim turned to attack the Gojun with a wide grin that was terrible. Gojo realizes that the Gangrim has lost control of him for some reason, so he helps revive the Gangrim by hitting him in the face really hard. But managed to escape as the Gangrim was knocked unconscious thanks to Gojun's punch. When he regained consciousness, Gangrim immediately took a restorer pill. He immediately looked at Gojun with sharp eyes and told the person to find another partner. Gangrim doesn't want to go near Gojun, who is often shy, but Gojun is only interested in him. Everyone else is just an extra. Gojun also said they don't have unique characters and no storyline. Gojun wants to be top 2 major player with Gangrim. He said this. While throwing Gangrim's sword back, Gojun asks Gangrim to make up. Meanwhile, Nam Yu-jun ran in panic while covering his face. Even though he uses the invisibility skill, he is still panicking because now there are 2 people who know his identity as a killer. Moreover, the 2 of them were simply too strong. Clearly, Namjoon confused how to fight them. It was at this moment that suddenly the voices of his teammates called out to look for him. Worryingly, this young man smiled slyly and finally found another way to become stronger. Then Namjoon showed his body and ran with an innocent face as usual. He said he found a body lying in the forest and said someone else had committed a crime. But when he got close to his friends, this young man pretended to be in pain and sat down. He uses this opportunity to reach for his sword, even though his comrades are very worried about him. But they had to die at the hands of Nam Yoon-jun in no time. After all his friends died, Nam Yoon-jun made the god named Fear of the Living and the Dead very satisfied. So the god gave him a gift in the form of a necklace. With the necklace, Jun's strength increased by 10%. He was clearly happy to see this. With this, he was sure he could kill Seo Gangrim. Not forgetting, he thanked the god who had given him this opportunity. But when Yoon-jun had just finished speaking, suddenly, a heavy downpour started to appear with this. The energy of the water around Woo-jun increased, and this clashed with his abilities. Because of this, Jun's start dropped to 10%. The Council of Nahal told him that there was nothing to worry about with this rain, because Gangrim's attribute was also fire. Yoon-jun smiled happily and thanked him. He is determined to find Gangrim before the rain gets heavier. Meanwhile, Seo Gangrim was busy cutting down trees with his sword, even though Yoon-jun was walking towards him. As far as Gangrim went, there was only one tree left, but he still didn't lose instinct, noticed Jun's presence, and managed to fend off the young man's attack. Even though he tried to attack the Gangrim from behind, at this point, while attacking Gangrim, Yoon-jun realized his opponent had weakened. He was a little disappointed because of this. Then the sound of 2 swords clashing was enough to eat the ears. Yoon-jun looks very eager to beat Seo Gangrim, who is mostly parrying attacks. Namjoon says he shouldn't have to kill all his friends if Gangrim is going to weaken to this extent. They continued to fight fiercely and mercilessly. Nam Yunjun continued to corner Seo Gangrim. But suddenly the Gangrim smiled faintly, and this made Jun confused. He asks, "Why is Gangrim smiling?" That question was immediately answered when suddenly the Gangrim attribute changed from fire to water. With this, the Gangrim start that had decreased immediately recovered quickly. His attacks became even stronger on Jun. Now everything has turned around. It is Gangrim who is now pressing Namjoon with his powerful and agile attacks. This is because Gangrim's ability increased by 10%. As soon as his attributes changed, Yunjin protested to God Nahal, who gave wrong information about Gangrim's attributes, because Gangrim's attribute turned out to be water. His ability also increases in the rain like now. Suddenly lightning struck the tree behind Gangrim. This young man looked at Yunjun with very dark, sharp eyes. When asked what is the information that tells about himself, he panicked because he was increasingly pressured by Seo Gangrim's abilities. But God tried to strengthen Namjoon by saying Namjoon's ability was stronger than Seo Gangrim. After knowing this, Yunjun became excited again. He also threw his sword with all his might and tried to reverse the situation with one strike. Gangrim's sword was destroyed by Namjoon. Even though this young man didn't know how Gangrim changed his attributes, he still confidently taught and said he was the stronger one, and was thrown away until he hit a big fire because of lightning. Nam Yunjun didn't waste this opportunity, and immediately directed his weapon at Gangrim, who was getting pushed against a tree. Yunjun said, "This is very fun for him." He also told Seo Gangrim that he would not be lonely because later Nam Yun would also kill other Gangrim friends. But right after saying that, he was suddenly stabbed by a mysterious longsword. Gangrim's eyes were very sharp when he was finally able to stop a villain like Nam Yun. He swore at the sword, but Seo Gangrim was not finished. He pulled the sword forcibly to make Junjun even more painful. Yunjun tries to call God Nahal and ask for his help. Unfortunately, it was too late because at that very second the Gangrim stabbed him to death again. After his opponent died standing over Nam Yunjun's body, saying that he also gained strength after killing by extending his hand towards Yunjun's body. Gangrim finally stole Nam Yun's destiny. After Yunjun died, Seo Gangrim returned to hunting the praying mantis monster. While fighting, Seo Gangrim thought the benefits after using this skill exceeded expectations. He managed to get a sword called Lightning Strike, which is unique with many branches of the blade. This weapon is made from a branch of a spirit tree, which has the power of a lightning strike, and its strength is also increasing. First, Seo Gangrim was looking for so many spirit stones using the Demon World map. After that, he cut down all the trees around him, then put a lightning rod on top of the tree after defeating Yunjun. Of course, he took the youth's equipment and abilities, but why did his destiny level keep increasing? It's just that Gangrim hears more and more voices saying he has killed someone. This is of course very disturbing. Seo Gangrim on a hunt, suddenly Gojun appears and asks why Seo Gangrim is back doing nonsense by hunting monsters. He asks where is Yun. Instead of answering Gangrim, they asked back, why are the Gojuns here? Instead of guarding the gate of room 4? Apparently earlier, so Gangrim got angry when Gojun asked him to make up, because Gojun lost the killer. In order to restore Gangrim's trust, Gojun asks what he can do. Gangrim seems to be deep in thought. He doesn't want to take the risk. Besides, this could be a crucial moment for him to test Gojun's loyalty. So now that Gangrim asked Gojun to do as he asked, first they took out a Demon World map and reminded the two maps to update. From here it was seen that the gate of the other zone was located. He told the Gojuns to go to that gate just in case the assassin did not escape from there. Now Gojun returned to Xiao with a long, vulnerable time. Seo Gangrim has already won his match. Gangrim says he cannot find him and suspects that the killer escaped from another gate. So he decided to stop hunting Namjoon. But Gojun doesn't believe it. He believes Seo Gangrim has killed Jun and managed to get Namjoon's necklace as booty. Gangrim suddenly removed Gojun's hand from his necklace, saying that the necklace was a gift from God. While his sword is broken, so he has to buy a new sword from the shop. Gangrim also asked Gojun not to involve himself in the young man's wild delusions, because he doesn't know anything. Seeing Seo Gangrim's determination, Gojun said he must be deceived. But if Gangrim really managed to defeat Yunjun, he could tell that to Gojun. Because now the young man is on Gangrim's side. He was silent hearing Gojun's words just now. Then he turned around and asked Gojun to stop acting like they were friends. The Gojuns would go and return to collect spirit pearls. He also took the time to congratulate Gangrim, who he thought had obtained 1,000 spirit pearls. Gangrim fell silent as he watched Gojun leave. Now Gangrim had actually succeeded in picking up his 1,000th spirit pearl. With this, the fourth practice room mission is over for Seo Gangrim. This young man also said this is a good thing and he can breathe easy now. Then in the first lobby room, the twins kept begging Gangrim to accept them as his students, but Gangrim firmly refused. They even promised to do good hunting and would do whatever Gangrim wanted. One of the twins asked why Gang Lin didn't want to be their master. Were they too weak? Though they also obtained god-level knowledge. Gangrim is astonished to hear God's knowledge. He begins to use the ability to see destiny. Winter says he received God's knowledge about the moon, hunting, and the maiden, while New Spring received Sun Archer's knowledge. It was the same with the gods Apollo and Artemis. He commented they both got the god that matched. Then the twins ask if Gangrim will accept the twins as apprentices. But Gangrim instead asked them to become followers of the gods instead. Clearly the twins became sad hearing that. But Yoon asks, what kind of divine knowledge does Master Gangrim know? Gangrim replies, he doesn't have the knowledge of gods because he doesn't have gods. Yoon Spring was surprised and asked how the young man could distinguish the father of the gods and humans. The twins explained that between the gods guarding the same diffraction, there is synergy between them. Yoon Winter suddenly shut his brother's mouth so as not to say more. Yoon Winter then diverts the conversation by saying that Sis Soa is also not interested in God's knowledge. So is Gangrim Master the same way? Gangrim says he doesn't want to be too knowledgeable of gods, nor does he want to become a master. But just now the twins caught the gruesome killing look of the Gangrim. He asked in his mind, is there any reason why the Gangrim Master didn't acquire the knowledge of gods? He said once again, he didn't have the ability to teach the twins. The young man had not finished speaking. Suddenly the first room gate opened, making the three of them surprised, and looked in one direction, realizing someone had fallen from the gate. Gangrim stood up and rushed to help the person to the totem statue. Gangrim asks if the priest is all right. The priest replied, he was fine and thanked the Gangrim. His head still hurts a little and he said he was very scared when he met monsters. The priest lowered his head and said a Kenner crew who can't kill monsters is so pitiful. He was sad because he was very scared to see a monster. Suddenly Gangrim turned friendly by putting on a cheerful face while asking, did the priest need his help? Clearly the priest was shocked and asked, why did Gangrim offer him help? The twins are also excited and willing to help Gangrim. But they were asked to go hunting by the Gangrim, and if the twins would listen to Gangrim, then the young man promised to consider becoming the master of the twins. Of course the twins immediately ran to hunt to room 4. Hearing Gangrim's words just now when he saw Gangrim was very busy, the priest asked if he had any objections, because seems like he was too much of a bother during Gangrim time. Gangrim immediately returned to being friendly and chatting with the priest. Inside his head, the Gangrim couldn't possibly mind, because now he was imitating Gojun in his previous life. Gangrim says in times like these they should help each other. Immediately Pastor John's face was immediately cheerful and seemed to have a new hope. Hearing this, he even wanted to call Gangrim his brother. Now he invited the priest to discuss hunting. Next, he deliberately accepted the priest as his partner because he has the ability to heal hands. This ability can heal wounds on the target, able to heal bleeding, paralysis, poisoning, and the like. The higher the rank, the less amount of mana used and less recovery time. Meanwhile, in the break room, Chairman Gong was sitting with 2 of his staff. They ask why today team leader looks happy. Then the team leader replied because there was a player who managed to hit the target the first time in their area, even faster than Region 1. While they were chatting, suddenly, team leader Baekyoung appeared. Just hearing his name made team leader Gong immediately annoyed and squeezed his coffee cup. Chairman Gong asked the girl at the door, what is she doing here? Chief Baekyoung replied, he heard the news so he wanted to celebrate. He heard that there was the first player to hit the target in Region 2, so he congratulated leader Gong. Chairman Baekyoung also asked for the next Region 1 and Region 2. Won't we meet? Chairman Gong confirmed this. Then leader Baekyoung, the beautiful woman with long purple hair, asked Chairman Gong to make a bet, namely the one who succeeded in the attack the first time, with a high level of difficulty between the team of leader Gong and his trainees. And among the students of Chairman Baekyoung, who do you think will win? Chairman Gong agreed to the bet and asked, Chairman Baekyoung, what do you want to bet? Chairman Baekyoung answered, what if the loser grants one wish from the winner? Leader Baekyoung asked that Chairman Gong won't be coming, right? Instantly, Chairman Gong's anger peaked. Hearing that because he was sure they would definitely win, so there was no reason for him to be afraid. Chairman Baekyoung asked once again, so is Chairman Gong willing to take part in the bet? Chairman Gong quickly agreed. After being satisfied with that answer, finally Chairman Baekyoung came out to the door room saying, he will look forward to the match and don't forget to say goodbye to everyone in the room. As soon as Chairman Baekyoung left, Chairman Gong immediately glared at the two staff in front of him. He asks them both to do anything for their team's victory. Even Chairman Gong asked them to take special measures, with a sharp gaze filled with earnestness. Meanwhile, in another place, Gangrim is giving all his spirit pearls to Pastor Johannes. With that now, Pastor John's spirit count reached 1,000 and he had successfully cleared the 4th practice room. Pastor Johannes can't believe Gangrim did this to him. He can't even believe Gangrim was able to collect that many pearls in just 2 days. This priest knew he had worked very hard. Gangrim himself knew that Pastor Johannes had also experienced difficulties with his healthy abilities. Pastor Johannes often contributed to the healing of Gangrim wounds. Even so, Pastor John felt it was not enough to repay the Gangrim. He knelt down in front of Pastor John and said it was enough. Because everyone did what they should do. It's just that people can't see the value of Pastor John at this time. Pastor Johannes was obviously touched by the words. Then Gangrim asked Pastor Johannes to get ready to go to the 5th floor room. When they left the gate of room 4, they both got a message from Hanafi. The message contains a notification that the 5th room will be opened soon, because the participants will spend a lot of time in the 5th room compared to the previous room. He hopes that the participants make preparations in advance before challenging the 5th room. The first team has entered 5 days ago, so their team will depart tomorrow morning. Finally today they split up and will meet again the next day in front of the totem statue. The next day, they both entered the 5th room together. As soon as he entered the room, Pastor John was immediately stunned by the beautiful view. The blue sea stretched out. Pastor John almost couldn't believe it. Suddenly a hologram screen pops up saying they have entered the reveal room. This room has special conditions. First, the initial conquest reward for this room varies depending on the difficulty level. Shops are restricted in this room, and the 3 participants cannot leave this room until the subjugation is complete. In his mind, Gangrim remembered that because of the 3rd rule, he suffered a lot in his previous life. The system notified that once they got the subjugation conditions, they could return to the lobby. Pastor John complained because they didn't even tell the conditions of the settlement. Gangrim explains they should be able to try to find them one by one. The story begins with manager Kim, starting with showing a middle-aged girl and man named Kim who is the girl's father. The girl's name was Minji. She screamed angrily at her father, who looked pitiful and had no self-esteem because he knelt before other people in front of his eyes. Minji is angry because she doesn't feel guilty, instead being blamed and accused of hitting another girl, when in reality it was the blonde girl who hit her first. The blonde girl's mother did not accept Minji's behavior and ordered the head of the school committee to hold a meeting on violence at school and record Minji's behavior in an assessment report. The head of the committee explained to Kim, who was kneeling in front of him, that Minji and the blonde named Hyeri had fought 3 times, and right now, Hyeri's bruises looked pretty bad. Then the head of the committee whispered to Kim to make a deal, informing him that Hyeri's father was actually a famous person who had many political connections, especially Jo-young Construction, and it was pointless for Kim to make a big deal out of this. The head of the committee seems to want to protect Kim and Minji, because fighting Hyeri and her family could end badly for both of them. Kim, who was on his knees, didn't really accept it, but he again apologized to Hyeri and her parents. Kim apologized and said that Minji had many shortcomings because she actually raised Minji alone, and again said that she was very sorry. Minji also cried seeing her father kneel down and kept apologizing, even though it was not Minji's fault. After that incident, in the afternoon, Kim and Minji were seen walking home. Minji was seen annoyed and silent, while Kim tried to lighten the mood by inviting Minji to eat together, but Minji refused. Minji stopped walking and said that he really hated food, hated school, and moreover he really hated his father who was very weak. While other people's fathers are members of parliament and officials who have power, while his father is only a manager of a small company. Minji then cried and regretted her miserable life because she was born as Kim's daughter and had nothing. Minji asked her father why he was born if he had no power. Kim could only silently hear the outpouring of her daughter's heart. Minji walked and shouted to her father not to look for Minji for a while, because Minji planned not to go home and stayed at her friend Hyeon's house. Kim could only remain silent watching her daughter go farther and farther away from her. But when night fell, Minji was seen being surrounded by Hyeri and a bunch of people. There, Hyeri slapped Minji's face and told Minji to hit her again. Even though there were a lot of people, It seemed to be Hieri's accomplice. Minji didn't flinch and replied by slapping Hieri's face. When Hieri and Minji were fighting, suddenly one of the big thugs kicked Minji, and the man named Minho was also a member of the KK crew and was Hieri's boyfriend. Minho said that he doesn't hesitate to beat up women even, and he also won't let Minji touch his girlfriend. Hieri even heated up Minho by saying that Minji was just a loser who had no friends. Minji, who saw Hieri, said that despicable people would indeed play with despicable people, and that was very disgusting for her. Minho, who was annoyed, grabbed Minji and slapped him, while the other people who witnessed were silent, feeling goosebumps. Other people there who saw Minji being beaten suggested that Minho should stop because it was very dangerous if Minji could die. But suddenly Hieri ran holding a rock and hit Minji with it. As a result of the blow, Minji was knocked down, and once again his head hit a rock, so that he suddenly became unconscious. Seeing that, everyone panicked and thought that Minji had died, especially Minho, who was very scared. In this situation, one of the women tried to call 911, but Minho held the girl because if this matter was reported, then Minho would be arrested. And if he is caught, then everyone here will also be caught, because he will drag them down by reporting them as his accomplices. Minho also made it clear to everyone that if someone reported it and Minho was caught, then everyone would die. Because they were afraid of Minho, everyone there finally complied and didn't report it. Minho said that he would contact the crew leader, although Minho wasn't sure the crew leader would help him, because Minho himself was just a new member of the crew. But when Minho called the crew leader named Mincheol, the crew leader immediately refused before Minho even explained it. Minho was silent for a moment in panic, but suddenly Hieri grabbed the cell phone and told the crew leader that Hieri was the daughter of Jo Kang-chan, CEO of Jo Young Construction, and asked that Hieri be introduced to someone who could fix the problem. Moving to Minji's house, Kim is seen sitting at the dining table with an anxious face waiting for her daughter, who is late at night but never comes home. Hieri and Minho were seen with the gangsters in a car. Then one of the gangsters, wearing a leopard print shirt, asked to confirm whether it was true that Hieri was the daughter of President Jo Kang-chan, and he said usually he would not want to help with something like this, but because this was a request the president's daughter, he will help her, especially with a special service. Hieri told the gangster to get serious and settle this matter perfectly. The gangster smiled and told Hieri not to worry because lately technology is getting better and problems will be solved quickly, where the gangster said that Japan has technology that can eliminate someone without a trace, and what he meant was a compactor machine, where if a person is put into the compactor, the machine will vibrate and the person inside will become the size of a fist. Hieri, who heard the gangster's words, got goosebumps, and she ordered Hieri and Minho to get out of the car, because from there the gangsters would work. The gangster also advised her not to have to pay, because he would collect it directly from President Ju. Meanwhile, Minji, who was thought to be dead, turns out to be half-conscious in the trunk of the car. Back at home, Kim was seen sleeping waiting for Minji, who never came home. Kim suddenly woke up to the sound of her cell phone ringing, and she looked at the clock, which was already 2 p.m., but Minji still hadn't come home. The next day, Kim was walking in town holding a suitcase, and on the way, he suddenly saw a lot of people gathered in an alley. Everyone gathered there, seeing that there was a lot of blood, and thought yesterday there was a fight in the alley. Kim was also wondering what was going on. Then when Kim looked down, she saw a hair tie, and remembered that the hair tie was the same as the hair tie worn by Hieri yesterday at school. Suspicious, Kim called Hyeryong and asked if Hyeryong was with Minji yesterday. After hearing the answer from Hyeryong saying that Minji wasn't with him yesterday, Kim ended the call, and Kim's face immediately became angry. On the other hand, Hieri is seen walking with Minho. While walking, Hieri looks still worried and asks if everything is going well, and Minho tells Hieri not to worry. Minho said that Minji's father was just a loser, and it was impossible for him to find his daughter. Minho said that for a while he would accompany Hieri to the house. But when the two of them were talking suddenly, Kim appeared from behind calling them, and that suddenly surprised Hieri and Minho. Kim said that there was something she wanted to ask for a moment, and introduced herself as Minji's father. Minho immediately held Kim's collar and clenched his fists while saying that Kim surprised him. When Minho turned to his left, he found Hieri, who was trembling for fear that their secret would be revealed. Seeing Hieri like that, Minho avoided it and said that he didn't know Minji. Kim also showed the hair tie she found, and asked if it was Hieri's hair tie. Minho once again threatened him and told him to leave because he wasn't in a good mood right now. Flashback to Kim's past, we can see Kim, who holds the rank of sergeant, shouting that he wants to go home, and in front of him, there is a group of soldiers on standby with their rifles. One of the soldiers told Kim to calm down, because a situation like this would only complicate matters. While pointing his gun at an old soldier, he begged if he only wanted to go home. The panicked old soldier told Kim to calm down and asked how Kim could know the woman he met last night was his girlfriend. Then one of the soldiers shouted at him to stay calm, but suddenly a gunshot sounded which made everyone panic, especially the old soldier who had wet his pants. The old soldier cried and ordered Kim to be let go home, because everyone knew that Kim was a madman. Back to the present, Minho, who saw Kim, was still silent and did not leave in the end, making his emotions so high that he took off his clothes and showed off his tattoos. Minho thought because he took off his shirt and showed off his tattoos, maybe Kim would be daunted, but this Kim was not at all afraid, making Minho run and tear Kim's clothes. Immediately, Minho's ferocious face turned flat, because Minho saw lots of scars and gunshots on Kim's body. Then it was discovered that Kim was a former soldier with the rank of sergeant who was assigned to North Korea 17 times, became a South Korean spy 5 times, escaped from prison twice, and attempted to assassinate the North Korean commander once. Kim has been branded as a fugitive by North Korea, and agents from China and Russia have been assigned to find Kim. They seem afraid to let Kim go because no one knows if Kim will cause trouble outside. Then, with his sharp gaze, Kim attacked Minho and kicked Minho, who could do nothing but resignedly accept his fate. Kim told Minho that he wanted to know where Minji was. It didn't stop there. Kim strangled Minho with the Hieri hair tie he found earlier. And of course, Minho couldn't do anything because he was suffocating. Seeing that Hieri screamed and cried, telling Kim to stop, while choking Minho, Kim asked left or right, and told Minho to just tell the way. While crying, Minho said that he didn't even know where they were taking Minji. Kim again asked if Minho also didn't know the gangster's contact, while Minho stammered, saying that he didn't know because he was just a new member. If Kim wanted to contact the gangster, he would have to contact the crew leader directly, and that was Mincheol. Continuing at night in a house, you can see a gentleman begging for forgiveness and apologizing to a tattooed man who is smoking. That person is the KK crew leader named Mincheol. Mincheol grabbed the father's hair and said, "Don't joke with him," because the father had already signed a contract with him, which was a letter of borrowing money, where if the borrower couldn't pay the time, his daughter would bear the consequences. Then the father's daughter was seen being held hostage by his subordinates, while Mincheol kept slapping the father. Mincheol didn't stop beating the father because he was so annoyed that the father couldn't be responsible for the deadline in the contract. At first, the father wanted to stop Mincheol because his daughter was still a student, but Mincheol didn't want to know and said, "Then why don't you replace him?" Mincheol shouted while kicking the father. Then Mincheol ordered his men to take the girl, and the girl could only cry and whine, calling her father's name. Instead of helping, his father just turned his face away. Then Mincheol held the father's head and told the father to watch his daughter being taken away as a consequence of being irresponsible. The father also closed his eyes because he could not see his son undergo. On the other hand, Kim, who always carries her suitcase, arrives outside the house and rings the doorbell. Hearing the sound of the bell, one of Mincheol's men reports that someone is coming. Mincheol was curious and asked to make sure if it was a food delivery man, but his men said that he did order food, but it wasn't delivered right away, making them confused as to who was out there. Previously, this Mincheol was able to contact the gangster because he was contacted first, and that was the chance for him to call the gangster while they were on the phone. The gangster immediately agreed upon hearing Ju Kang-chan's Ju Young construction president's name. After hearing Mincheol's explanation, Kim twisted Mincheol's hand, which made Mincheol scream in pain. "I don't know. You think you can do this in this country?" "I will report you, damn," Mincheol said. "So can you do this?" Kim said, immediately breaking Mincheol's arm without hesitation. Then Kim got closer to Mincheol and told Mincheol to answer what Mincheol believed to be safe, and Mincheol loudly said he believed in the law. Hearing that, Kim asked, "Didn't you break the law with that loan agreement?" Then Mincheol laughed heartily, saying that we are underage children, and even if we are guilty, the state will not punish us. Kim immediately kicked Mincheol's face, which made Mincheol thrash in pain. Then Kim searched for things from the suitcase that she always carried earlier, and saw that there was a revolver complete with a silencer. Putting a silencer on the gun, Kim said, "Children who have lost their parents are called orphans. Wives who have lost their husbands are called widows. Husbands who have lost their wives are called widowers. But there is no term for parents who have lost their children. And it is so sad and painful that it makes me don't want to lose anything anymore. Violation of the law of minors is a good reason. Then I will commit adult crimes," said Kim, pointing his gun at Mincheol's genitals. Seeing Kim with his gun, Mincheol got so goosebumps that he cried whining, and said that in fact, he was not a minor. But Mincheol is still sure that Kim won't dare to shoot him. But beyond his expectations, Kim pulled the trigger of the gun without thinking. Mincheol screamed in pain because his leg was shot. With a very panicked face, Mincheol shouted, ordering him to call an ambulance in 911. Kim, who was packing his luggage, said that he let Mincheol live because Kim was sure Minji was still alive, or if he didn't, Mincheol would have died. Law violations underage, you said, don't be ridiculous. Punches are closer than laws, Kim said to Mincheol while showing his fists, while Mincheol could only silently cry. Kim stood up and reminded him that he would not be silent if his daughter was disturbed by delinquents, and warned not to get involved in something like this again. Mincheol also ordered his men to tell the people outside to just go home if they weren't delivering food. Then his men rushed and approached the people outside. But on his way to the door, he saw it was already open, and asked who it was. Without further ado, he was immediately beaten unconscious by Kim. Hearing the sound of hitting, Mincheol and the others were confused and curious. Then Mincheol told his other men to get ready and hit with a baseball bat. But when the door opened and Mincheol's henchman punched him, he was very surprised because Kim used his friend earlier as a shield. Kim then immediately attacked the chin of the fat boy many times and took out a rope to attack the fat boy. The fat boy ended up hanging without being able to put up a fight. Kim approached the fat boy and asked where Minji was. The fat boy was surprised because he didn't know who Minji was at all. Thinking that the fat guy was lying, Kim pulled the rope tightly on the fat guy and made the fat guy scream in pain. The fat guy shouted that he was honest and didn't even know who Minji was. Because his leg looked like it was about to break, the fat man asked Mincheol for help, but Mincheol was seen trying to escape through the window, leaving his two men behind. Mincheol also escaped through the window and ran as hard as he could, where he was curious about who the father who was angry at his base earlier. Or maybe he was a policeman, and how he could know his secret base. While running, Mincheol suddenly fell because he stepped over a rope which made his face bleed. After all, it hit the asphalt, and how shocked Mincheol was when he saw the many trapping ropes that had been installed around his residence. From behind came Kim, who immediately attacked Mincheol with his rope. Furthermore, Kim gathered Mincheol and his men at the house earlier. Kim covered all of their faces and beat them all one by one. Mincheol kept saying to Kim that he didn't know because he got a chat invite from an app. Kim asks him what app it is, and Mincheol explains it's for creating chat rooms and talking anonymously. Kim also removed the cloth from Mincheol's head and saw Mincheol's battered face. Mincheol again explained that he couldn't contact the gangsters, and they could only be contacted if they contacted Mincheol first. Then Kim asked how Mincheol previously contacted the gangster, and Mincheol's cell phone would be confiscated by Kim. When he wanted to take the cell phone, suddenly a ringing sound was heard, which contained a message that the girl who had fought with the president's daughter before would be transported to the ship tonight, and the girl in question was Minji. From the conversation, it can be seen that Mincheol wants Minji to die. Seeing the incoming message, Kim immediately fell silent in disbelief and felt so disappointed that she had tears in her eyes. Kim also called that number and then heard the gangster's cell phone ringing in the car, heard the sound of the gangster's cell phone asking what was wrong with his men. But his men said that he only told Mincheol that the girl was already on the ship according to directions. The gangster's subordinate was curious why Mincheol suddenly called him, because he usually sends a message before calling. Seeing that the gangster ordered his men not to pick up the call because he felt it was from the police, the gangster also ordered his subordinates to delete all chats and not take calls from the crew just yet and throw the cell phone away. Back to Kim, he walked towards Mincheol and said that the chat was no longer available with tears that kept on flowing. Kim ordered Mincheol to reconnect the chat, but Mincheol said that was impossible because the gangsters had deleted it. Kim immediately strangled Mincheol while repeatedly asking where his daughter was, also telling Mincheol to stop the nonsense and reconnect with them. Suddenly, someone took a knife and stabbed Kim, and that person was the borrower. Seeing that Mincheol smiled happily and told the father to stab again. It seems that the father deliberately helped Mincheol to pay off his debt. But when he tried to stab Kim one more time, the knife got stuck between her armpits, and Kim immediately stood up and took the knife. Mincheol was surprised by this, thinking that he would be attacked by Kim. When Kim was running, suddenly an officer came to the house with an electric gun. The officer told Kim to put down the knife, and Kim immediately stopped with her face flowing with tears. Furthermore, at the police station, 2 of Mincheol's subordinates were seen complaining that Kim was crazy and fired his gun. The police also ordered the 2 boys to calm down while Kim just kept quiet. The police have yet to find out Kim's identity, and when they checked Kim's cell phone, they found nothing. Then, while taking fingerprints Kim and checking them, the policeman became very confused by the fingerprint matching system. The fat man couldn't stop saying that Kim was crazy for constantly asking about his daughter, when he honestly didn't know. Because Kim was silent, the fat man told Kim to speak and kicked Kim many times. "You can't do anything because your hands are handcuffed, right?" said the fat boy. But the police chief ordered his subordinates to call Ching Chan and Bong Sa, and then Ching Chan and Bong Sa with big bodies came to the fat boy, who immediately lost his guts. Ching Chan and Bong Sa are special police officers with judo skills. Then one of the police heard Kim's cell phone ringing, and he saw the call was from a number with my daughter's name. Kim's gaze changed sharply. Kim himself and the police guarding him were very surprised to see Kim's handcuffs being released by the policeman who was holding a cell phone. Kim was very surprised when she turned to the right, because in an instant, all the police had been flattened, and behind her, Kim was seen, who immediately pushed the policeman against the wall. Then Kim told the policeman to be quiet and took his cell phone. Kim also picked up his cell phone repeatedly while calling his daughter, but there was no answer at all from the person who called with his daughter's number. Kim tried to call back his daughter's number, but this time only heard the number can't be contacted. Kim's fists are clenched in annoyance. Then Kim walked out of the police station where everyone had fallen helplessly. The next day, all the police at the police station were gathered by Inspector General Cheol Jun. The inspector couldn't believe seeing everyone so easily finished off by one person, because it could damage his reputation, which will be promoted this year. Then there was a man wearing a jacket and a fedora hat, who was detained by a police officer not to cross their territory. The man also showed his identification, which immediately made the police goosebumps. The inspector, who looked back, thought that the man was a journalist, and immediately the man grabbed the inspector's shoulder and slapped him in the face many times. "What are you doing? Are you in charge here?" says the man in the fedora hat. And that man is Director Kang Guk Cheol of the Special Operations Department known as Ground Dog. He ordered the inspector to prepare to take off the uniform while sucking on his black filter, and then asked his subordinates, "Is this the place?" And his subordinates are saying the truth because he has identified the existence of Code 66 here, where he has confirmed his daughter's GPS has been turned off, while the GPS Code 66 is Kim herself. Guk Cheol says that he is sure that Kim has thrown away his cell phone because Kim is not that stupid. But his subordinates break his assumption because Kim's GPS is still moving. Guk Cheol was surprised and asked where was Kim's last location. His subordinates said that Kim was at a taekwondo center. Moving to the taekwondo center, you can see the children who are practicing taekwondo being taught by their sabum. Then Sabum orders the children to rest for 10 minutes first. Sabum approached Kim, who was sitting there, and said that they had not seen each other for a long time. That Sabum is Song Han-soo, chairman of High-End Taekwondo, a former Korean gold medal athlete. Sung Han-soo asked Kim about what brought him here, and was sure that there was a serious problem. Kim told him that his daughter had died, which shocked Han-soo. Kim said that she wasn't sure if her daughter had died because Minji called her number. Kim also said that she should have thrown away her cell phone but couldn't because she still hoped Minji would call her number again. Kim's current status is being pursued by the authorities, and he apologizes because he only remembers Han-soo at this time. Then we see men in suits running to Kim's last location. Han-soo also said that in the past, Kim had saved Tae-yeon. Thanks to Kim, she had survived and therefore she would return the favor. "I know how it feels to lose a child," said Han-soo, but Han-soo told Kim to send the children back to the dojang first. When Kim and Han-soo approached the children, it was seen that the authorities had arrived there, and one of the children was excited because he thought they were playing with them. Seeing this, Han-soo swiftly kicked Guk Cheol's face, and Guk Cheol caught that kick. Before Gukcheol could say any further words, Han-soo immediately attacked with his left foot that landed right on Gukcheol's face. So that the boy wouldn't think about it and feel comfortable, Han-soo performed the attraction of picking up a thrown food. Then Han-soo stroked the boy's head and said that the dojang closed faster and told the boy to go straight to the next tutoring place. Gukcheol got back on his feet and threw a fist which was easily blocked by Kim. "There are children here," said Kim, while Gukcheol said that he was looking for code 66, and it was Kim. Han-soo then immediately kicked Gukcheol until he was sent flying. Han-soo quickly executed a kick attack at the man in the suit. The underlings felt goosebumps seeing the taekwondo in front of them, flattening everyone, wondering who that person was. Then they saw Sung Han-soo's name on a black belt, and immediately they remembered Han-soo, who was a legendary athlete representing the country, where the news said that Han-soo was so great that he was invited to North Korea. After beating up several people, Han-soo and Kim ran away. While running, Han-soo laughed, saying that he was reminded of his past. Han-soo asked Kim what Kim needed. Kim replied that he needed a bunker. Then Kim and Han-soo were seen in the van, and Han-soo stepped on the gas in his car. Han-soo, who was driving, said that the highway was busy, and asked if Kim still remembered how to use the device, and Kim was busy working on a high-tech computer behind. While driving, Han-soo told Kim to look for a frequency. Now it's different from when Kim was active in the military before, but soon Kim said that he had found the frequency, which was a bit far from where they are now. Then we saw Kim and Han-soo arriving at a place where Han-soo wasn't sure about the place Kim was directing because they arrived at a high school with lots of delinquent students. The high school is Drunk High School, which is the most naughty high school in the South Gyeonggi area. Because he was still not sure, Han-soo again asked if it was true that Minji was at this high school. Then one of the high school boys asked what Kim and Han-soo were doing there. That boy was Shim Ijin, deputy crew leader of KAA. They all asked why came here in taekwondo clothes and thought Han-soo was going to cosplay. Then Shim Ijin ordered these two middle-aged gentlemen to leave because today there was a meeting of 4 crews for the Gyeonggi South area and warned them not to wander around if they didn't want to die. But Kim and Han-soo ignored them and went past Shim Ijin, where they wanted to head to the radar's location. Seeing the 2 old men, Shim Ijin didn't accept it and held Kim's shoulder, but Kim easily slammed Shim Ijin, which made all the boys goosebumps. Then when Shim Ijin was on the ground, Kim stepped on Shim Ijin's chest and asked about the whereabouts of Kim Minji, 2 end grade class 7 song in high school, at the same time mentioning her character wearing a black jacket and red tie. Also in her cell phone, there was a heart key ring. "Have you ever seen her?" Shim Ijin fearfully says she's never seen anyone with that trait, and Kim asks not to get in the way if she doesn't know. On the other hand, inside the school building, you can see a person named Hyung-min lurking through the window and telling someone that there was a commotion outside. Then saw a delinquent named Shin Sung-ho, who is the affiliate chairman of the Gyeonggi South region, where this Sung-ho is a boxing athlete who is known to be unbeatable in his area. He told Hyung-min that today was an important meeting and everyone should stay quiet, and if Hyung-min had time to worry, he'd better bring one more woman in front of him. Back to Kim, it can be seen that Kim beat up all the kids in front of him who did not accept that his friends were beaten. Kim also easily beat all the kids in front of him. Meanwhile, in the background, 2 fat students from Asan Technical High School are talking, saying that the Taishin High School students are very noisy, where one of them asks if he needs to interfere, but his partner forbids him and says that the chairman has ordered them to remain calm. Suddenly, from behind, Han-soo appeared and said to the 2 boys that he was looking for a student named Minji and asked if they knew Minji. Behind Han-soo, one student was seen secretly wanting to attack Han-soo, but he immediately realized and kicked the boy behind him. "I didn't intend to kick him because I remembered my son because my son is also going through puberty," Han-soo told them. The 2 fat boys from Asan High School didn't accept it and tried to attack Han-soo with weapons, but Han-soo dodged and jumped around in the sky. The 2 boys got goosebumps seeing Han-soo, whose body was so light. Then came one boy with his red axe, where the boy was the deputy crew leader of the Asan Technical High School OD. But even before finishing his sentence, the boy immediately received a series of kicks from Han-soo, and for Han-soo's final kick, the boy immediately fainted. Han-soo tightened his belt and said that the axe had crossed the line. Han-soo said to the 2 boys that he wanted to go to the main first floor. The 2 boys just kept silent and got goosebumps because they saw the previous one, who was much stronger, fall so easily. Then another boy who smoked a cigarette said that Kim and Han-soo would die if they went there. Kim ignored him and immediately punched the boy's face. Continuing into the drunken high school corridor, Hyung Min was seen asking who Kim was. Where this Kim, without a word, immediately beat up all the students while dragging a boy whose face was already battered. Where the boy was used by Kim as a guide. Hyung Min took off his glasses and said he was just an ordinary middle-aged man, and immediately ran but punched his chin. Kim easily parried the fist and threw a lightning-fast attack to lock Hyung Min's hand, which made Hyung Min fly. When Hyung Min couldn't do anything, Kim threw a fist and said, "Don't get in my way." Because of that punch, Hyung Min was thrown into the teacher's room where Sung-ho and the others were gathered. The boys in the room were very surprised and wondered if it was the police who had come looking for them. Kim entered the room and glared at them, but Kim's gaze was fixed on Sung-ho, in whose uniform pocket there was a cell phone with a heart keychain like Minji's. One tattooed boy pushed Kim's shoulder and asked who he was. Kim, whose eyes were only on Sung-ho, beat the boy with one strike, and the other tattooed boys tried to attack Kim. But again they all fell and Kim came to Sung-ho, who was sitting. Kim then pointed at Sung-ho's pocket and asked with an angry face where Sung-ho got the cell phone. Then Sung-ho said that he got it from the girl last night without giving more details, and with his lewd face added that the girl in the photo was very sexy. Kim was suddenly furious. When Sung-ho blinked, he was surprised because he couldn't see anything, and it turned out that Sung-ho's face had been destroyed by Kim. Kim hit Sung-ho's face repeatedly. Then when Sung-ho fell on the floor, Kim stuck a pen between Sung-ho's fingers, and then Kim stepped on Sung-ho's hand until it broke, which made Sung-ho roll around in pain. Seeing Kim like this, Han-soo told Kim to stop because Sung-ho could die. Moreover, everything that Sung-ho said before was just a joke. Then Kim asked with an angry face to Sung-ho once again, "Is it true that Sung-ho doesn't know Minji?" Sung-ho explained that he got the cell phone from his men, where his men gave all the women's cell phones that had been collected, and Sung-ho was very happy when he saw Minji's photo on the cell phone. Sung-ho also tried to look through the contents of the cell phone and laughed when he found out that Minji only had his father's contacts. It was while looking around that Sung-ho accidentally dialed Kim's number, and that's exactly what happened. After hearing Sung-ho's explanation, Kim was suddenly surprised and asked if it was true that Minji's cell phone only had Kim's contacts. Sung-ho remembered that there was contact with someone named Hyeyong, where Sung-ho said that Hyeyong really couldn't be called a friend after seeing Minji's conversation with him. Kim was even more surprised, because he remembered that Minji always permitted him to meet Hyeyong. Then Kim opened the conversation, and saw that Hyeyong was just using Minji where Hyeyong always borrowed Minji's cell phone and money. Then Suho, whose face was already battered, apologized if it seemed that the girl named Hyeyong was only using your child as a maid, so that it could be concluded that Minji had no friends at school, and Hyeyong came over to Minji to borrow Minji's cell phone. Minji also asked why she had to lend her cell phone, but Hyeyong said because we are close friends, which immediately made Minji dumbfounded because someone considered herself Minji's friend, and lent her cell phone to Hyeyong because she was happy when she finally had a friend. After being loaned Hyeyong's cell phone, he made fun of Minji's cell phone, which is tacky because there was a heart accessory on her cell phone. While at home, Minji smiled and said to her father that she had a friend named Hyeyong. And one time when Kim was angry because Minji didn't pick up her phone, Minji was evasive by saying that she was very busy hanging out with her friends, even though it was because Minji lent her cell phone to Hyeyong. Because of that, Kim felt disappointed with herself, who did not know anything about her daughter. Minji, who has been suffering all this time, thought Kim, who was silently disappointed with herself. Han-soo then approached and said that now is not the time to brood over mistakes and get carried away. Where Han-soo said the most important thing right now was looking for Minji and apologized straight away because Kim never paid attention to Minji. Han-soo then held Kim and said that he knew how shocked Kim felt and had tried all this time. Even so, a father must remain strong, where a father must live by burying sadness one by one in his heart because they are the best. Kim realized and said that Han-soo's words were very true. Then Kim came to Sung-ho and held his collar. Kim again asked where Sung-ho found Minji's cell phone, continuing during the day to see a homeless person who likes to get drunk and has the mindset that the goal of life is just to get drunk. He was confused to see two men, namely Kim and also Han-soo. Kim immediately showed Minji's cell phone and asked if it was true that the tramp was selling Minji's cell phone to buy alcohol. The homeless person said the truth and asked why, and where did you steal it? Asked Kim. The homeless person did not accept that he was called a thief, but Kim said that this was an embezzlement of stolen goods and grabbed the homeless man's arm to be taken to the police station. The homeless let go of Kim's hand and said it couldn't be like that because he didn't pick up and steal the cell phone. Hearing those words, Kim approached the homeless person's face and said, "If so, you brought this cell phone after seeing someone throw it away, right?" The tramp was silent. Flashback to yesterday. Last night the homeless man saw a bald man carrying a plastic bag where the man was a gangster's subordinate who was assigned to dispose of Minji's belongings. The homeless person rushed to the trash and found a cell phone and wallet. Then came the delinquent boy under Sungo, who saw the homeless man on the side of the road. They also came to the homeless to seize Minji's mobile phone. And that's what happened. Kim didn't say anything and turned around with a vengeful face to find the gangster who brought Minji. Kim again asked the tramp what number plate and the type of gangster car the tramp saw, and the tramp broke into cold sweat seeing Kim's sharp eyes and wondering in his head who was the man in front of him who had a gunshot wound. Because he was so angry, Kim was holding the homeless man's shirt and asked once again. The tramp also said that he saw a bald man. His car was a white sedan, but he didn't see the license plate, and the rest he didn't know at all. After hearing the explanation of the homeless bum, Kim and Han-soo were getting ready to leave. Seeing that Kim and Han-soo were about to leave, the homeless man ventured to ask for money, the information he had given because he had helped Kim. Kim and Han-soo were silent in disbelief seeing this homeless man dare to ask for wages. Han-soo went to the homeless man saying he did have to pay. The homeless man was immediately happy because he would get the money, but Han-soo threw a 501 coin where Han-soo smiled and bent the coin with his finger while saying, "Is this not much for you?" During the day at a port, a gangster and his subordinates saw a gangster open the trunk of his car and said that the trunk was very smelly. Then the gangster told his subordinates to wrap the Minji and also ordered his other subordinates to bring equipment. Then you see an iron container where the uncle gangster and his subordinates put Minji in the container. "Everything is over, and all that's left is to betray President Joe, damn it," said the gangster with a big smile. So it turns out that this gangster has a grudge against Hieri's father, namely President Joe, because it was Joe Kang-chan who made all his teeth fall out, and this gangster is very vengeful with Ju Kang-chan, who he considers like a monster. This gangster has been waiting for revenge for a long time. Gangsters can't harass President Joe because he is a very important person, but an extraordinary coincidence for the gangster is because President Joe's daughter is in trouble. While the gangster and his subordinates were chatting, suddenly an officer came who asked who was there and ordered the gangster and his subordinates to approach the officer. But suddenly the officer was directly stabbed by the bald underling gangster. A gangster dared to do such a thing because it remains only to blame all this trouble on President Joe. Then the bald man smiled and suggested that this officer should also be put in the compactor. The gangster also agreed and said that today's children are very stupid for believing what he said about compaction machines from Japan, even though he only puts people into frozen iron containers. After putting the officers into the container where Minji was placed, the gangsters left the container. Inside the container, you can see the plastic wrapping Minji moving around, in which it seems that this Minji isn't actually dead. Back to Kim's side, Kim and Han-soo were seen driving a car and rushing to find Minji. But Kim said we have to find Minji within 5 minutes, because if it takes 5 minutes they will lose track. While in the car, Kim was seen busy looking for information from all the regional CCTVs. Han-soo told Kim to enter the type of car, the color and the time it happened. Then he got some information from the homeless man. Then you can see the CCTV footage showing the homeless man and also a white sedan. Then Kim said he saw the gangster subordinate bald who got out of the car through the CCTV. Han-soo told Kim to pause and try to get information from the bald man's face through the device. Kim finds out that this bald man is called Sangman, who is 41 years old and has 2 criminal records, but Kim is confused there is no information about the owner of the white sedan. Han-soo told Kim to find the location of his license plate. The system also started progress to find the whereabouts of the car. Kim was impatient with the system still working at 95%. When the process had reached 99% and was about to be finished, suddenly their car was hit from the side, which caused the car that Kim and Han-soo were riding in overturned. While rolling, Kim's gaze was still focused on the system, where it was finally seen that the last location of the car was in the Pyeongtaek area, with a distance of 9.2 kilometers from Kim and Han-soo's current location. Then their car lay down because it was rolled over. And then someone was seen getting out of the car that hit Kim and Han-soo, where that person was the one who was relentlessly chasing Kim and Han-soo. Guk-cheol also said that Kim and Han-soo had violated the driving rules and took out his gun, aiming at the car. Kim and Han-soo Kim also intended to get out of the car, but he was stopped by Han-soo, who asked what Kim would do. Kim also said out loud that it's useless to run away because they will continue to be chased by the Guk-cheol, where this Kim intends to kill Guk-cheol right now. Guk-cheol, who was aiming with his gun, ordered code 66, namely Kim, to come out right now. But he was surprised because it was Han-soo who got out of the car while raising his hand as if to give himself up. So previously Han-soo and Kim had a plan for Kim to just go, and Han-soo is going to arrest Guk-cheol because he can get excited if Kim kills a government employee. Then Guk-cheol shouted, asking, "Where is code 66? Suddenly Han-soo's car exploded, which made Guk-cheol very surprised where the explosion was intentional, so Kim could escape and find the coordinates of the gangsters on the pier. Kim also jumped into the river. After that, Guk-cheol said, "What are you planning, damn? What do you think I won't shoot civilians?" Han-soo walked towards Guk-cheol and said that he was not a civilian. Hearing that even though he was aiming at Han-soo's head and getting ready to pull the trigger, he immediately brushed aside the small hand and kicked Guk-cheol until he was sent flying backwards. "You really shot," said Han-soo. Guk-cheol also said that earlier it was a warning shot, and immediately Guk-cheol took the gun that came back and fired at Han-soo, who kept dodging shots. Then Guk-cheol told Han-soo to stop and take the bullets from behind his back. Han-soo was silent. "Han-soo, seems like your kick is weakening," he said. "Before you could destroy rocks with your kick," Guk-cheol said, where he was very surprised to see Han-soo, who had disappeared, and it turned out that Han-soo was floating in the air. Han-soo also did a sharp kick to the asphalt until it was destroyed, where the kick was still avoided by him. Guk-cheol took aim again, where the gun in his hand was immediately thrown after his hand was kicked by Han-soo. "You must be surprised that it was just a warning kick," he said sarcastically at Guk-cheol's warning shot earlier. Annoyed with Han-soo's words, Guk-cheol takes out his knife and tries to attack Han-soo, who can still hold the knife. Han-soo also did multiple kicks, and one final kick on the Guk-cheol. Because of the fight earlier, Guk-cheol felt pain in his body, while Han-soo found his face bleeding because he was slashed by the Guk-cheol's knife. Then came a mob of Guk-cheol underlings with sirens blaring. Han-soo also made a move that made Guk-cheol shiver. Han-soo started to move and did a jump kick from a very far direction. Seeing Han-soo jumping from a very far away, he thought it was impossible. But that assumption was immediately broken because Han-soo made 4 turns, namely 1440 degrees, and had calculated the distance. Guk-cheol became increasingly panicked, feeling that Han-soo's talent was extraordinary and difficult for anyone to achieve. Han-soo was right in front of him with a killer kick aimed at him. His subordinates panicked seeing Guk-cheol. After kicking Guk-cheol behind the bridge, Han-soo jumps onto the bridge along with Guk-cheol. Moving back to Kim, seen Kim, who had arrived at the port and found a white sedan belonging to gangsters. After finding the white sedan, Kim saw a trail of blood on the ground leading to an iron cooler container. Inside the container, of course, one can see the officer who was killed by the bald gangster. But what is surprising is Minji, who is still alive and trying to find a way out of the iron container. Minji screamed for help, banging on the container door. Because he was tired, no one heard his help. Minji sat down, and Minji felt cold because the container was equipped with a cooler. He could only hope that his father would help him. Outside the container, a man was seen opening the container door. Seeing someone enter, Minji became curious and thought it was his father. But that person turned out to be a leopard gangster who was calling Ju Kang's number, Chan. And because her calls were not being answered, she became very upset. Minji was afraid and tried to hide so as not to be caught. Gangsters also saw a suspicious footprint where it was a footprint from Minji's shoe. While busy paying attention to the footprints, the leopard gangster was suddenly pushed by the officer in the container earlier. The gangster didn't expect that he was still alive, and then attacked the officers with his knife. Seeing this incident, Minji panicked, where Minji panicked even more because the gangster's cell phone fell nearby. Minji also tried to glance at the cell phone and saw that the cell phone was calling Ju Kang-chan's number. While picking up his fallen cell phone, then the gangster sighed in annoyance, where he just wanted to take Minji's photo as a threat to Ju Kang-chan. Suddenly there was a ringing of a gangster's cell phone called by Ju Kang-chan. The gangster picked up the call and asked how Ju Kang-chan was doing. Jo Kang-chan also said that he had heard that his daughter Hyeri asked for help from gangsters. Jo Kang-chan also invited the gangsters to meet and talk privately. The gangster chuckled and said it was a very good idea. While on the phone, Jo Kang-chan stroked Hyeri's head and said that her daughter looks strong on the outside, even though the inside is very fragile, and now she looks very shocked. So it's not good to be involved in children's problems for too long, where Jo Kang-chan wants this gangster to get to the point, just so that this problem is quickly resolved. But stop this pleasantries right now, damn, said the gangster with an annoyed face. The gangster then ordered Jo Kang-chan to come to the location he marked an hour from now, prepared 2 billion in cash and came alone without bodyguards or police, especially the crook conflict manager named Nam. The gangster threatens that if he violates one condition, he will make Hyeri branded a contract killer for life. Hyeri was also curious about what her father and gangsters were talking about, where her father only smiled. After the conversation ended, Jo Kang-chan came to Hyeri and told Hyeri not to worry because her father would take care of everything. Hyeri, you know what our family is like. We won't fall down easily. If you are the eldest son in Joe's family, then act like the eldest son. The sea won't get wet by the rain, said President Joe as he walked away. Then when walking with an annoyed face, President Joe called Nam and told Nam to prepare 500 million and a pair of pliers. Back on a rainy afternoon at the port, inside the container looks a gangster who realizes that he took a wrong step because he was too passionate. Gangsters walked out of the container and Minji tried to find a way out of the container. While outside, gangster sees rainy sky and cleans his shoes. While glancing at the container, the gangster accidentally met Minji's gaze, which surprised them both. Minji swiftly closed the container door. Because the door was locked, the gangster shouted at Minji to open the container door. Minji closed the container door with a crowbar. Although getting annoyed that he got into a lot of trouble today, the gangster tries to call the bald Sangman's number. On the other hand, in a room where the gangster's subordinates gathered, Bald and the other gangsters were shocked to see Kim, who opened the door. Kim looked at Bald and realized that this bald man was the exact same person she had seen from the search engines. With a sharp gaze, Kim saw the Bald and closed the door. Seeing Kim, the gangsters stood up and got ready. Then a big man came asking who Kim was while holding his head. Kim also showed Minji's cell phone to the man. On the other hand, the gangster was busy calling the bald man's number, which didn't pick up and made him very annoyed. Then there was a call on the gangster's cell phone where the gangster thought it was the bald guy's call. But it turns out that it was a call from another subordinate where his subordinates reported that they would arrive soon, and they brought a mysterious person with a hat named Kang Min. After hearing the report of his men, the gangster ordered his men to go see Bald first, because he suspected something was wrong, and ordered Kang Min to go to the container immediately. On the other hand, in the room where the gangsters were gathered, all the gangsters who had fallen could be seen, while the Bald ran scared because he was chased by Kim. Kim, who was running, jumped and kicked the bald man, which made the bald man fall down. The bald man got up and climbed a tower ladder while running. The bald man shouted suspiciously that Kim was the messenger of President Joe, saying that we moved him after being contacted. From the start, he was dead. Who died? Shouted Kim. Seeing the bald man who was cornered, Kim asked again who died and who was President Jo Kang-chan. But suddenly Kim was surprised to see the bald man who was desperate to jump from the high tower. The bald one tried to hold the iron rope that dangles as if he's imitating an action scene from a movie. But because his hands were not strong enough to withstand the friction, Bald ended up dying below because he fell from a height. On the other hand, a gangster is seen on the phone with his men and asks what really happened. His men explain that it looks like the gangster gathering room was attacked, where there's no bald man, and the others. Hearing that, the gangster is shocked and orders his subordinates to look for the bald man. Then seen the big body who staggered because he was beaten by Kim earlier. The big body climbed into a white sedan, and he was very surprised because Kim suddenly hit the glass of the car until it broke and told him to get out of the car. He was scared and refused to get out of the car. Seeing the big body that refused his orders, Kim took out a wire to unlock the car. He was even more panicked because Kim easily opened the car door. When Kim wanted to pull it, he shouted saying the owner of the cell phone that Kim pointed out was in a cooling container, and it was President Joe's order to send it to Japan. While talking to the fat man, suddenly someone hit Kim from behind where it was another gangster's underling. Kim immediately attacked the gangsters and beat them all with ease. Behind you can see the big body trying to escape. The big body also sees a truck and steals the truck from a man who is eating a burger. He also pushed hard on the truck to escape himself, and when he looked in the mirror, he saw that Kim did not stop chasing him. Kim also ran fast and jumped over several containers where Kim was now close to his truck. Kim quickly jumped up and kicked the truck's windshield until it broke. Kim's action made the truck lose balance and finally plunged into the sea. The people who saw the incident also tried to contact the police, and they saw Kim, who was swimming while holding the big body. Kim said to the big body that wherever they ran, Kim would not let them go because she had dared to touch her daughter. Kim asked where the container the big guy was referring to was, and the scene shifted, showing the gangster saying that what Minji was doing was pointless because Minji wouldn't be able to last long and the one who would lose was Minji himself. Inside the container, Minji looks very cold and keeps calling her father's name. Heard Minji calling his father. Suddenly an idea emerged from the gangster's head. He also squatted in front of the container door and asked Minji to negotiate. On the opposite side, Kim was seen arriving with the big body as a guide. Moving on to President Ju Kang-chan, President Joe can be seen with his bodyguards. Nam was getting ready to check all the communication devices on each car. When all the preparations were done, the other cars were told to go ahead, except for car 1. Then one of the bodyguards who was driving asked President Joe, "Is Nam really needed for thugs and village champs like this?" President Joe explains that the person they are fighting is a person who is quite smart and also cunning. Back to the gangster who invited Minji to negotiate, where this gangster promised to release Minji on the condition that Minji joins him against President Joe. Minji also said that this gangster was lying because he was sure that if he left, he would definitely kill him like the officer before. Hearing that, the gangster smiled and asked how old Minji was. Minji also said he was 18 years old. Then the gangster said that he felt guilty because Minji saw what happened earlier, and he couldn't let Minji live. Even though this gangster was planning to release Minji before Minji said that. "You are really stupid, but you will live if you pretend not to know," said the gangster. Then suddenly a big body appeared from behind calling the gangster, and the gangster was very surprised to see the big body staggering and asked what really happened. When the two of them were close together suddenly, the gangster's expression changed drastically because he felt that this big body had betrayed him and was in conspiracy with President Joe. The gangster immediately beat this big body, and he also said to the gangster that he didn't do that. Behind appeared Kim, who pulled out the rope. Seeing Kim, the gangster became curious and thought that Kim was someone sent by President Joe. Kim also walked up to the gangster with the intention to kill.